up towards Shetland during this evening, so turning a bit damp here. As we go through the night, not a great deal of change. Most places will stay dry. If anything, we'll see the cloud melting away, certainly from many inland areas. Always the possibility of the mist and low cloud returning to some of the coasts, especially around the southwest. And the cloud will thicken once more over the western Isles of Scotland, with some drizzly rain pushing back in here through the early hours as the breeze picks up. Quite a warm night, temperatures holding up in the teens in most urban areas. On to Thursday, and it will be a hotter day, a sunnier day for most of England and Wales, southern and eastern parts of Scotland. Northern Ireland also probably seeing more sunshine tomorrow. The north coast may be seeing some thicker cloud, and the west coast of Scotland again susceptible to cloud and rain. Quite breezy here as well, but for most it's all about the sunshine and those temperatures rising into the mid-20s, 30 for some.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk
No,
now?
that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Emmanuel Macron has blamed dear Keir Starmer for the small boats crisis. The French president has swiped, said unless there is a crackdown on bumper benefits handouts and the prospect of easy work in the black economy, the dinghies will never, ever stop leaving France. And do you know what? Macron's got a point. And at PMQs earlier today, Nigel Farage was harangued and jeered so loudly by opposition MPs it was impossible to even hear his question. Look at Corbyn there, sniggering on the back row next to Zara Sultana. And I put this to you. Has the Speaker totally lost control of the Commons? And after Macron was snubbed the Reform UK leader, is the entire political establishment biased against him? And a damning new report published today claims that victims of the infected blood scandal are waiting to die in limbo. On today's show, I'll be joined by a survivor who claims that too many are dying without getting the justice or the compensation they so richly deserve. And do you remember when Sir Keir Starmer got all muddled up when he was asked the question, what is a woman?
Have a penis.
Look, I'm not... I don't think we can conduct this debate with, you know...
Sorry, have I offended you in some?
No, it's just...
Well, the trans confusion returns because despite the Supreme Court's ruling that a trans woman is not a woman, the Labour Party have put forward a biological man to be a women's officer. You couldn't make it up, and I'll be joined by the former Labour fearless MP Rosie Duffield, who was hounded out of the party over this trans absurdity. That's all on today's show. Welcome to the show. I put it to you, utterly disgraceful scenes in the House of Commons today at PMQs. Take a look at this clip.
And that we demand, the country demands, that you say to the French president, will you shut up?
You couldn't hear a single thing Nigel Farage says. Doesn't matter if you agree with Nigel Farage or Jeremy Corbyn or anybody else in the House of Commons. Be quiet and let them talk. That's the point. It's a free chamber. Today, it descended into an absolute circus. I still don't know what the question was. I still am none the wiser. A leader of a political party, no matter what their stripes, has every reason to be heard in the chamber. What's going on with the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle? Did nothing to intervene, stood by as it descended into an utter farce. I'm joined in the studio today by Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of Reform UK. He was sat next to Mr Farage in chamber for his opinion. Let me know what you think. Is the entire establishment trying to silence Nigel Farage? Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But now it's your headlines, and here's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. Your top stories at 3:03. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch pressed Sir Keir Starmer on tax rises at PMQs today, with the Prime Minister committing not to raise income tax, VAT or national insurance on employees, as promised in Labour's manifesto. Ms Badenoch also put it to him that he's flirting with calls for a wealth tax.
Mr Speaker, in their manifesto last year, Labour promised not to increase income tax, not to increase national insurance and not to increase VAT. Does the Prime Minister still stand by his promises?
Yes.
It is rare that he's able to give a clear answer, but I'm glad that he has done so, because he also promised, in fact, he boasted that he solved the doctors' strike, but only a Prime Minister who was so weak and giving 28% pay rise to doctors, only now we see that they're still voting to strike again. He folds in every negotiation and claims that it is a triumph. Yes, he does. And we saw at the budget, Mr Speaker, more promises. The Chancellor promised that she would lift the freeze on income tax and national insurance thresholds, because in her words, they hurt working people. Is that still government policy?
We are absolutely fixed on our fiscal rules. We remain committed to them. We remain committed to our budget, to our manifesto commitments. I realise that sticking to your fiscal rules and your manifesto commitments is a bit unfamiliar to the party opposite, but it's because of the decisions the Chancellor took, that this government has taken, that we can update the House. £120 billion of inward investment into this country since we took office. Business confidence at a 9-year high. That's longer than the Leader Opposition has been in Parliament. Deloitte this week saying the UK is now the best place to invest, creating 384,000 jobs. What a contrast to the mess that we inherited from the party opposite.
Elsewhere today, the French president is being hosted by the Prime Minister at number 10 Downing Street. The pair arrived a short while ago, where they'll be hosted today and tomorrow. They'll hold talks as the UK pushes for France to do more to stop illegal migrant crossings. Mr Macron's demanding tough action to make the UK less attractive to illegal migrant arrivals. The Prime Minister hopes to strike a one-in, one-out deal to send small boat migrants back to the continent in exchange for the UK accepting asylum seekers in Europe who have a British link. This follows President Macron's visit to see King Charles, which culminated in a state banquet last night. The two men bid farewell in Windsor this morning. Victims of the infected blood scandal say they are waiting to die in limbo, with just hundreds having received compensation to date. In a hard-hitting report, the chair of the public inquiry into the disaster, Sir Brian Langstaff, said there were obvious injustices in the way the scheme had been devised. He adds only 460 people had received compensation. It's thought 30,000 people were infected with HIV and hepatitis B or C in the 1970s and 80s after being given contaminated blood products on the NHS. Resident doctors in England will walk out for 5 days later this month. They'll walk off the job from 7 a.m. on the 25th of July in a dispute over pay, the British Medical Association has said. More than 26,000 resident doctors voted in favour of the strikes. Greg Wallace has been sacked as presenter of MasterChef after an independent inquiry into allegations of serious misconduct. The decision comes as 50 new claims emerge, including accusations that Wallace groped colleagues and exposed himself to junior staff. He denies the allegations, though admitted some of his past comments had been inappropriate. And thousands of cases that would normally be heard in front of a jury should be decided by judges alone, according to recommendations made by a former senior judge. There are almost 77,000 cases waiting for trial in the Crown Court in England and Wales, meaning some defendants and victims are waiting years for justice. Sir Brian Leveson suggested reforms to reduce the risk of total collapse in the system, but some barristers argue juries are essential for fair justice. Director of Public Prosecution Stephen Parkinson said this report is a bold but necessary response to the mounting pressures facing our justice system. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's market. The pound will buy you $1.3616 and €1.1617. The price of gold is £2,430.92 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,861 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Welcome to the show. What a belter we've got. Let's get going, because if you were watching PMQs earlier on today, then you might not have been able to hear Nigel Farage in the chamber. Let's take a listen back.
And that we demand, the country demands that you say to the French president, will you shut up? Undocumented males across the English Channel, and that you are not dictated to by an increasingly arrogant anti-Brexit French leader.
His proposal for 10 years, wagging the Tory dog, has been to break everything and claim that's how you fix things, to stick two fingers up at your neighbours and then expect them to work with us. And he votes against the Borders Bill, which gives more powers to our law enforcement to deal with security at our border. And Mr. Speaker, the reason for that is he has no interest in fixing the problem because he wants to milk it and exploit it. That's the truth about him and his party.
Well, next, Lee Anderson from Reform UK stepped up, calling for a point of order after Nigel Farage was heckled by MPs.
Honourable Member for Clacton asked what I thought was quite a reasonable question, because I knew what the question was going to be, but during PMQs I couldn't hear a single word. I'm sure people in this chamber couldn't, because people like the Honourable Member for Dewsbury behind me never shut up all the way through. Yeah. The Honourable Member for Clacton was trying to ask a reasonable question. We do not subscribe to this sort of dog whistle politics and reform UK. So, Mr. Speaker, could you please give us advice on how to stop this behaviour in the future?
Well, there you go. Order, order, bang out of order. Let's discuss it now in the studio. I'm joined by GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley, who's back from maternity. Lovely to see you. GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and a man who was sat next to Nigel Farage, so hopefully he can shed some light on what the question was. And as the deputy leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Welcome all to the show. Olivia, let's start with you. I've got to say, I listened to that on the radio live. I couldn't hear a single thing Nigel Farage was saying. I listened to it 4 or 5 times back on social media. I'm still none the wiser as to what the question was. My point to you is quite simple. Irrespective of anybody's political beliefs, in that chamber, there should be order when somebody speaks. Today, there was a total lack of order. And I put it to you, people are already saying that it seems that there's an establishment drive to try and keep Nigel Farage silent and heckled. And the Speaker, many felt, was sadly lacking in his ability to control the House. All 3 of my guests in the studio today, you were all there at PMQs. What did you make of it?
Well, I think we should say first, there is a lot of noise and jousting at PMQs. You do expect speakers to be interrupted when they're asking questions. The Prime Minister gets interrupted. Nigel Farage definitely takes more flack than other MPs. And I think what was particularly unusual about what happened today is you would normally see the Speaker intervene far, far earlier when there are that many interruptions. Lindsay Hoyle is actually well-liked across the House. He's got a very, very different approach to his predecessor, John Bercow, and he normally doesn't take any nonsense from MPs, even during PMQs. It is normally possible for MPs to get their point across. Today, it was not possible. You said you listened to it 5 times. I was in the chamber. I could barely hear it at all. I think there may have been some sort of technical issue going on as well, because there seemed to be some kind of feedback from the mics. But again, why was this only affecting Nigel Farage? I can see why someone like Lee Anderson is feeling really, really annoyed about it. And from the outside, it might look like a sort of concerted campaign against Nigel Farage. It'll be really interesting to see if anyone from the Commons team, from the Speaker's team, has anything to say about this, or whether it will just be put down to one of those things, a noisier, rambunctious PMQs just before recess.
Maybe the screaming feedback was Jeremy Corbyn, who was sat right behind him. Richard Tice, you were sat there next to Nigel Farage. First of all, what was the question?
So the question was that millions of people voted for Brexit. We want to take back control of our borders, but that Nigel was saying we don't want tens of thousands of undocumented illegal migrants crossing the Channel. And could he take that message to the increasingly arrogant French president? But it was hard to get the words out because it was complete chaos. You expect it from the opposition, but what came today was a concerted attempt from 2 sides behind Nigel's shoulder. I was right next to Nigel. I could barely hear what he was saying. And it was relentless from the member for Dewsbury. And so, that's why Lee Anderson said, can you please shut up? And it was pretty extraordinary. It's the place of other people to give comment about the Speaker. That's not for MPs. But I also do think there is a genuine concern from many people about what is happening to the microphones when Nigel gives a question, because they're supposed to be cut off for everybody else. And there is increasing evidence that that may not have happened today, and we will look and see whether or not actually that's been happening in the past, because this is not the first time.
Now, in the Brussels and the Strasbourg chambers, of course, they used to cut Nigel's microphone off the moment he'd gone over his time limit, but he got a fair crack of the whip and there was no other microphones turned on. Are you saying that cacophony of noise from all the other microphones is all going into one sound output, and so you simply can't understand what's being said by the person asking the question?
We are looking at there is genuine concern about what's going on with the microphones. It may be because it was directly behind Nigel that gentleman's voice was going straight into Nigel's microphone. So let's wait and see. But it was pretty chaotic. I mean, as Olivia says, it's always noisy in the chamber at PMQs. But whenever Nigel asks a question, it seems to be particularly noisy.
Nigel Nelson, let's bring you in. You were also there today, and you said that you have a microphone in the press gallery, so you get the sound feed of what's going on.
We have a loudspeaker.
Yeah, and you couldn't...
No, I couldn't hear.
I
agree with Olivia and with Richard there. I think there is something wrong somewhere with the technology. Broadly, when there is a lot of shouting and screaming in the chamber, it's part of the tradition of PMQs. What we've all got is a loudspeaker behind us, where if you sit back, you should be able to hear the person who's speaking. In this case, I couldn't hear Nigel either. I could hear Iqbal Mohammed behind him. I couldn't work out how that could have happened because it meant he had to be on Nigel's microphone. So the whole thing was really weird. I am surprised the speaker must have been in a similar position, that he didn't intervene earlier and sit down that member.
OK, well, let's come back to you. That doesn't really make things any clearer.
It doesn't, but the jury's out. I think there's more work to be done to find out what's going on with the microphones. But you talked about the establishment just earlier, Martin. It is significant that yesterday Nigel was the only leader not to be invited for a meeting with President Macron. And guess what? Surprise, surprise, he wasn't invited to the massive state banquet last night either. Really? We are polling way ahead of all of the other political parties. I think it was completely inappropriate.
Are you intimating what a lot of people are saying? And that is, there appears to be some kind of establishment lockdown, shutting out of Nigel Farage.
Well, what you can't shut out is the British people, the British voters, and that's why we're polling where we are, because I think people recognise that we should be heard, reform should be heard, and something is very wrong.
OK, well, let's go to our next topic now. I'm going to bring you back in, Olivia Utley. Of course, the question was about Emmanuel Macron, lest we forget, still the guest of honour. In fact, a short while ago, speaking with Sir Keir Starmer at Downing Street, an extraordinary state of affairs yesterday. It was Dear Keir, fawning over the Prime Minister, and Keir Starmer could barely contain the bromance in real time. We carried that live on the show today. Emmanuel Macron blaming Sir Keir Starmer for the small boats crisis, saying, actually, what a lot of people, including Nigel Farage, have been saying for a long time, until you clamp down on generous welfare payments, on hotels and jobs on the black market, the boats will continue to come. Macron blaming Sir Keir Starmer.
I know, it's a funny story, this, because it feels as though Emmanuel Macron is paradoxically a bit of a hero for Brexiteers over the last couple of days. He said that it is the UK government's fault that there are so many migrants crossing over in small boats. Obviously, we've reached a record this year of over 20,000 migrants coming over here in small boats. He says that there are too many pull factors to the UK. So you mentioned there the hotels, the ease with which illegal migrants to the UK can claim benefits if their asylum claim is accepted. Then you also have the state of the black market, the black jobs market in the UK, particularly the gig economy in the UK. While technically illegal migrants can't work in the UK, obviously many of them do. And actually Macron brought forward a really, really interesting statistic, which is that 1/3 of EU migrants entering the Schengen area, their ultimate goal is to get to the UK, which when you consider how big the EU Schengen area is, that is pretty astonishing. And he is now saying, Emmanuel Macron, that his payment for a one-in, one-out deal, which is what Keir Starmer is pushing for, would be for the UK to crack down on the routes, the easy routes for migrants to come here and get into the black market for jobs.
Let's get back to you, Richard Tice. Hold the front page. It's probably one of the first times you've ever agreed with Emmanuel Macron.
He's right. I mean, we're far too generous with these benefits. It's completely ridiculous. It's totally out of control. If you get a delivery or Just Eat's delivery, there's probably a 40% chance it'll be by someone who is essentially here illegally, working illegally, and it's got to stop. But at the moment, there is no will from this government to do that whatsoever. But equally, President Macron is at fault because he won't do what he's legally obliged to do, which is to stop the boats like the Belgian authorities. They stop them leaving the Belgian shores. Under the 1982 UN Convention of the Law at Sea, France has a legal obligation to stop those boats from leaving the French shores. And they are in breach of that obligation, which is why we have the legal entitlement and the right to do their job for them. And that requires political leadership and courage. that we're not seeing from the Labour Party and we didn't see from the Tories.
Nigel Nelson, final word to you. This is meant to be the moment where Keir Starmer cemented this bespoke deal with his brother from over the Channel.
Yeah.
And he may yet, but it's not the best of starts, where he's basically saying, it's your fault.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the some of the points made about the benefits, what asylum seekers get is under 50 quid a week if they're looking after themselves.
Free hotel.
That's hardly, not in a hotel. They'll get under a tenner a week if they're in a hotel. So and they're not benefits. There's an allowance. They get a card whereby they can draw essentials. But 10 quid for a week is hardly a huge amount.
Well, if you're getting your free food, your free heating, your free lodging.
But
a lot of people
you can't leave them on the street. So the question is, what do you do about them if you don't use the hotels? As far as the pull factor goes, the biggest pull factor is the fact that an asylum seeker cannot claim asylum unless they're on British soil. So until we can change that system, going across the Channel will remain the biggest draw.
So you think that anybody anywhere in the world should be allowed to have a pop and claim asylum?
No, I don't.
Britain?
I think
bear in mind about 85% get that granted.
No, I think that what you have to do is you have to change the system whereby they have to claim asylum here. There are other ways of doing it. The Tories tried the Illegal Migration Act. It didn't make crossing the Channel legal because it's not illegal. What it did do is make the asylum seekers inadmissible. And that's the key thing. So if they're inadmissible, then they have to go somewhere else. You've then got to find a country prepared to accept 20,000 people traipsing across it to go to a place where they could actually claim asylum there.
But this one in, one out policy is absolutely ludicrous. All it's going to result in is a huge surge in fake historic relationships and family links that supposedly people have as they come across. It will just lead to more criminality, more people coming across the English Channel. It's absolute lunacy.
But they will have the difference will be is that this is for the people smugglers. What they will have if they come across will be a safe route. They won't have to rely on paying the people smugglers, so at least it'll put a dent in their business.
No, they'll still come across because you'll get people claiming that they've got a family link to the UK.
But they won't have to come across in a small boat.
All right, gents. Now, Mr. Tice, you're here today because something caught your eye, and that is net zero, we hear, could cost £800 billion over the next 20 years. And this is not according to a crackpot think tank. It's the OBR. What's going on?
Well, they've confirmed what I said 15 months ago was the net zero would cost £30 billion every single year. At the time, Desnes says, we don't recognise that figure in a sort of pompous way. And now the OBR has said, actually, Tice is right. Once again, our numbers are bang on the money on the cost of net zero, 30 billion quid, taxpayers' cash, absolute lunacy. If you scrap net zero, then all of a sudden you can resolve Rachel Reeves's self-imposed massive black hole. It's easy when you know how, and when you've got a bit of political courage.
And the reason for this, like who didn't see this one coming down the road, pun intended, there's no more fuel duty coming in from diesel or petrol over the coming decades because of EV mandates. Nigel Nelson, this was guaranteed to be a problem. If you stop people driving cars with petrol or diesel, they're not paying any more fuel duty. This is a black hole caused by government policy. I put it to you, it's making the country poorer.
Well, it won't do once it's off the ground because you adjust taxes for that. You're absolutely right that obviously you won't get fuel duties in if people aren't using petrol and diesel, which is the whole point of going green. So
where's the money come from?
You adjust the taxes. You have to pay for your green fuel. I mean, if you're going to fill your car up with electricity, you will have taxes on that.
We've already got the world's most expensive electricity. What, you make it more expensive?
That'll make it so much more. The cost of electricity will go nuts.
You're adjusting the taxes to the point where you replace the loss you've had from petrol and diesel.
Which will make travelling per mile even more expensive than it currently will.
Provided the electricity...
It won't, because the electricity price is the highest in the world, and the number of tax you need on that.
At the moment, but provided we get everything off the ground, we get the wind farms and the solar farms in, it'll become cheaper.
Maybe we should have a windmill on top of our cars. That'll make them all go along. Gentlemen, we have to deal with that. Richard Tice, excellent. Nigel Nelson, excellent. Olivia Utley, got a beautiful picture. Let's get them on the screen. Of course, you've been off having your wonderful child. Let's get them up. There's baby. I'm in the way. Beautiful baby Wilfie with a flat cap.
It's like being at home, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I was missing him.
Just to make you feel really guilty you're at work. That's your job. It's wonderful to have you back. It really is. Thank you, your guest. A superb start to the show. Thank you very much. Now, coming up, a damning new report published today claims that victims of the infected blood scandal are waiting to die in limbo. I'll be hearing from survivors next. You're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The 12th, a day to celebrate history, community and family here in Northern Ireland. Join me, Arlene Foster.
And me, Dougie Beattie, as we bring you live coverage of the July 12th celebrations.
Right across the United Kingdom. It's all happening here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, this Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 3:28 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, victims of the infected blood scandal say they are waiting to die in limbo, with just hundreds having received compensation to date. And the chair of the inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, says compensation for victims must be faster and fairer after the report found that victims were harmed further by the delays, while reporter Adam Cherry has been out speaking with survivors.
I'm encouraged by what Sir Brian has taken the trouble to write yet another additional report, and he didn't sugarcoat, his criticisms that have been laid before him, because there's been so many complaints for us, and that's been reflected, and certainly reflected in his recommendations. Whether those recommendations are listened to and adhered to remains to be seen. Pretty much a frontline campaigner since I was 19, and I'm 54 now. And so, it makes you get used to how the people that want to make a difference, it's clear.
Thank you, Sir Brian, for having the foresight, for keeping the inquiry open so that we can actually look at this. My reactions is that his recommendations, some of them are obvious, and I don't know why he has to make them. You know, of course, the people who are directly affected by this compensation scheme, who have been directly affected and affected by the biggest scandal the NHS has ever seen, should, of course, be consulted into how this is going to work. And that didn't happen.
Do you think people are getting cynical now, given how long, as you're saying in your own answers, how long this has taken, decades? Is there any sort of light at the end of the tunnel for those still even here to see that happen?
Well, let's hope so. I mean, in our case, Dad was infected 50 years ago, August 1975. He died in February 99. They didn't diagnose him until late 96. By the time they'd done that, it was too late for him. And we've waited all that time. You know, since the diagnosis, we've waited for something. Since his death. My mother died in 2015 after 16 years of grief. Never seeing any justice, never seeing this inquiry or any of the support schemes or this compensation framework. I mean, it has been a long time coming, but now we've got this far. We're not going away. You know, this has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed with fairness and equity for everyone who's been infected and affected. And it's not like we haven't been patient.
Finally, do you think the government is listening?
Well, I hope so. I mean, we will see. I think they're making a statement tomorrow. We will see if they implement these recommendations. We thought the government was listening before, but then they rushed through this compensation scheme without any consultation and without any thought about the people who are going to be impacted. Then looking at it with a whole bunch of government lawyers who are there to stop the government's, you know, being accused of spending too much money. That should never have happened. I mean, we're supposed to have trust in our institutions and our government, and we are voting for them after all. And they should listen, particularly when this situation, as I say, it's the biggest NHS scandal in its history. And as Sir Brian said today, there's a lot of competition for that.
Credit to Sir Brian, I don't think, you know, with him being the chair of this inquiry, he's not going to sign off on it until he is happy and confident that things are being dealt with as they should be.
Now, the infected blood scandal victims fight on. Now, it's worth pointing out that before he was even elected, in May 2024, Sir Keir Starmer pledged to honour Rishi Sunak's mission to pay the victims. Let's take a listen to what Sir Keir Starmer said back then.
I acknowledge that this suffering was caused by wrongdoing, delay and systemic failure across the board, compounded by institutional defensiveness. And as Sir Brian Langstaff makes clear in his report, any apology today must be accompanied by action.
So I'm joined by Nigel Nelson. Nigel Nelson, Sir Keir Starmer there, that the will is definitely there. The intent is there to pay. The trouble is, this compensation package is the thick end of £12 billion. Has the government now simply ran out of money to honour this?
That's going to be the big worry all the way through. I mean, where it should come from is that this money was previously put aside, went into a contingency fund, which are designed just for this purpose. Let's hope they did that. But we've got to bear in mind that Rachel Reeves has just lost £5 billion from not being able to take money off the disabled. She lost another £1.5 billion because of pensioners giving back their winter fuel allowance. And we've got other costs coming up, like big defence costs. So, yes, it is a real worry that the money is simply not there. I think this was actually ring-fenced at the time, and I hope it was, but it was one of the reasons why, if you remember the WASPy women...
13 suicides during this, and people are dying every single week, and later in the show we'll speak to one of those people still waiting for compensation. Thank you very much, Nigel Nelson. And loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including forget digging their way out. Now there are fears that prisoners could escape from jail by being carried out by gigantic drones. This isn't science fiction, it could be science fact, and that's next. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Katie Bowen.
Good afternoon. The top stories at 3:34. Emmanuel Macron and his wife continue their state visit to the UK. The couple stayed at Windsor Castle last night, hosted by the King and Queen. He is now in Downing Street, meeting with the Prime Minister. Meanwhile, the south of France is battling severe wildfires that have forced the closure of Marseille Airport. At least 400 people have been evacuated from their homes, according to French media. Greg Wallace has been sacked as presenter of MasterChef after an independent inquiry into allegations of serious misconduct. He denies the allegations, though admitted some of his past comments had been inappropriate. And thousands of cases that would normally be heard in front of a jury should be decided by judges alone. That's according to recommendations made by a former senior judge. Those are the headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Temperatures are on the rise over the next few days. Most of us will see lots of sunshine. That includes the weekend as well. Main exception tomorrow. A bit like today will be the far north of Scotland, where we do have some thick cloud, a bit of rain and drizzle over the Northern Isles and at times over the Western Isles through the night. Most other areas will see the cloud that is about melting away and generally becoming dry with long clear spells. May turn a bit misty in parts of the west through the night, and it'll certainly be quite a warm night across East Anglia and the south east. Temperatures may hold up in the high teens in places. On to Thursday, hot and sunny kind of sums it up, but as always, one or two exceptions. Quite murky around some coasts, South Wales, around the coast of southwest England. Certainly initially the possibility of some mist and low cloud should tend to clear away inland, but it may linger, particularly around these Irish Sea coasts at times. And there'll be generally quite a bit of cloud across Northern Ireland, and certainly the west coast of Scotland starting fairly grey. Some light rain and drizzle here and there, and the potential for a bit more of that light rain to come into parts of the Western Isles as the day goes on. Staying quite breezy in the northwest, but otherwise the winds are pretty light, and as I said, apart from the risk of some mist and low cloud around coast, it's generally going to be dry and sunny, and it's hotting up as well. Temperatures for the first time in this spell likely to get up to 30 degrees somewhere across the southeast, many places in the mid to high 20s. A warmer day for Northern Ireland and southern Scotland. It will be cooler in the far northwest. Again here, the possibility across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles of some thicker cloud and the odd little bit of drizzle on Friday. But for most places, it's another hot one on Friday. Again, maybe some mist and low cloud around the Irish Sea coast, perhaps even on the east coast too. The coast will be a bit cooler with sea breezes, but inland, those temperatures ticking up further, more widely into the mid to high 20s, and probably getting hotter still this weekend.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. The A75 is closed in both directions at Creetown due to a collision. Motorists should use diversions and allow extra time. In Northumberland, all lanes are closed on the A1 southbound between the A1068 and A697. On the M6 southbound near Warrington, one lane is blocked due to an accident. Suffolk sees congestion on the A14 eastbound between junction 55 at Copdock and junction 56 at Ipswich Docks, with delays of about 20 minutes. And on the trains, Hull trains have a reduced service, and there is disruption on the London Overground between Dalston Junction and Clapham Junction. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back. Time is 3:39. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the official watchdog has warned that organised crime gangs could use drones to carry prisoners out of jail. Sounds like a science fiction move, but the Chief Inspector of Prisons said that technology was developing so quickly that already drones were bringing in as much as 10 kilograms of drugs and zombie knives into prisons. Now, apparently, there is a very real risk that these devices being developed to help use prisoners escape. Well, joining me now is the former prisoner and the justice journalist, David Shipley. David, welcome to the show. On the one hand, it sounds like something out of a Sylvester Stallone movie, a terrorist floating into the ether, being lifted by a drone. But already, this is off the back of a serious report. Two prisons, two maximum security prisons, HMP Long Lartin and HMP Manchester, already say they've lost control of the skies over prisons, routinely now airdropping drugs and weapons into our high-risk jails. Could a prisoner escape and be next?
I think it absolutely could be. There are drones which are capable of carrying the weight of a man, 100 kilos or so. So it's entirely possible. What's actually, in some ways, even more terrifying is the situation where drones could be used to bring people or weapons into a prison. At Long Lartin in June, we had an incident where apparently it seems a knife was brought in by drone and then used in a violent attack. So what might happen if drones are used to transport guns into prisons or explosives is terrifying.
And there are instances where they literally are flying up to windows in the night and they're hovering outside the windows and lags are simply reaching out and getting the package and putting it in. It's happening in full sight. Is there nothing that prisons can do to take back control of the airspace?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are absolutely things they can do. You're right about windows. So many prisons haven't got proper meshes across the windows, haven't got properly secure windows. And as a result, drones fly up to the window, deliver packages, and that's it. There are really basic things, netting over prison spaces to stop drones flying in, secure repaired windows, really simple stuff, good CCTV, night patrols. And when a delivery is noticed going to a cell, an immediate search of that cell. This can be done. And the problem is that the Ministry of Justice knows it's possible and are simply not acting on it. And I think that's a catastrophic failure of leadership.
And there are huge amounts of money to be made, of course, from airdropping drugs into prisons and getting people to buy them behind bars. And of course, from there, we have organised crime taking place behind bars. We have weapons going in. We have excelled and increased criminality in the very places where it's meant to be stamped down upon.
I think you're absolutely right. And this is, I think we so often hear so much bad news about prisons that it's easy to tune it out and just think it's more of the same. But actually, this annual report is terrifying. To have Charlie Taylor, who's the chief inspector of prisons, is a very, very, very sober, very reasonable man talking about a national security threat. He is not using those words lightly. We are in a situation where we may well lose control of some prisons on a functional level to organised crime. And the government needs to act or this could get very, very bad.
I mean, when you said there, David Shipley, about, there is the capability, we've seen drone technology advance, by quantum leap. Of course, in Ukraine wars, we now know that drones will be an integral part of warfare moving forward. So as a huge amount of research and development goes into them, it's completely fathomable that they could be used to lift a prisoner. It seems astonishing, but it could be true.
Of course it could be. And I think it's a very, very natural route of escape to consider if someone's considering an escape.
It's an incredible story. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Former prisoner and justice journalist David Shipley, thank you very, very much indeed. I'm going to quick bit of reaction to you from you, Nigel Nelson. I mean, when we talked about this earlier on, we were almost giggling. It's like,
I know.
Can this actually be true? It does sound like RoboCop or RoboLag, but he's saying quite clear there, David Shipley, technology exists. This could happen.
Yeah, and the answer is you've got to find some technology to combat it. So some of the ideas that are being played around with is a laser screen, which would stop the drones coming in. They've tried experiments with shoulder cannons, whereby you fire a net over the drone. They weren't terribly successful. And the Dutch had a go at training eagles to try and bring down the drones. We thought about it here until we discovered that the Dutch hadn't had as much success as we thought they were going to.
So at the moment, it seems once again that the bad guys are just always one step ahead of the good guys.
Nothing seems to be happening. I mean, David's best idea so far that I've heard was the idea of putting a net over the prison to stop the drones getting in. But I'm sure they'd find a way around that too.
You're going to need a pretty big net. I mean, prison compounds are like hundreds of metres square.
Exactly. I mean, but he makes the point. It would be a simple way of doing it to stop the drones getting in, but I'll bet they'd find a way around that. Yes, and it would be expensive, but it depends on whether you're going to do something about this or not.
It's an incredible story. It really, really is. But it's a serious report. This is the Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor, and he's saying the police and the prison service have, in effect, ceded the airspace over to maximum security jails. These are jails where there are terrorists, violent, armed criminals, some of the worst lags in Britain. Now they could be airlifted to safety.
Which is absolutely terrifying. I mean, I think that the worst thing is if they can get knives into a prison, they can get guns into a prison. And if it's a prison with terrorists in it, then we really do have a problem.
It's an incredible story. Nigel Nelson, thank you very, very much indeed. Now then, moving onwards, if you're in search of some holiday sun this year, then here is a forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Largely sunny skies across the Mediterranean. It is a little bit breezy in parts of Greece and Turkey over the next couple of days, but still lots of blue sky to be had here. Small chance of a shower in Croatia, but mostly they're staying away to the north and east. Small chance of a shower across Catalonia as well, but most of Spain dry and sunny. Bit of an onshore breeze bringing some cloud to the coasts of Portugal, and fine and sunny in the Canaries. Continued risk of a shower or two in Barcelona into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
For working class families, what are the fundamentals that they are looking for? They're looking for good housing, they're looking for good schools, they're looking for good jobs that give them a fair day's wage for a fair day's graft, they're looking for a strong NHS, and they're looking for safe communities to live in. When you have all of those foundations in place, then it means that children, young people, they can flourish, they can do well alongside their parents and their grandparents. And I think if you look at what this Labour government has done, we're 10 months into a 5-year programme here, by the way, but in the first 10 months of this new Labour government, they have put major policy reforms in place across all 5 of those key foundations for working class families. And so I'm confident that we're starting to see some of it here in Basildon, where Basildon is starting to get better again. I'm confident that by the end of this Parliament, because of what the government is doing now, we will start to see some positive changes for working class families.
OK, Christo, what do you make of it?
I think that Bridget Phillipson makes a very fair point when she says that white working class families and those peoples are being left behind. But unfortunately, her actions as Education Secretary don't align with what I believe are these completely hollow words. So, for instance, we've seen white working class boys particularly, but now girls, falling behind in education for absolutely years. So why Bridget Phillipson would then bring in a policy that is seeing, by the latest figures, 13,000 private school pupils entering the state school system, why on earth she would bring in that kind of policy, whilst then having the audacity to say that she's worried about white working class pupils not doing so well, is beyond me.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Who is he? What's he doing there?
They already know who you are, though.
Don't miss this special reunion. Eamon and Anne together again, only on GB News Breakfast this weekend from 6 a.m.
And is that a gardening tan?
No, it's a cypress tan.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 3:49. You with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, chaos in Bournemouth as reports of riots breaking out near the seafront has resulted in a teenage girl and a police officer being injured, while 6 others have been arrested. Now, if you recall, just last month, beach huts, the historic beach huts on the seafront, were destroyed in a mystery overnight blaze, never to be replaced. Some of them were listed and cherished in the area. Now, all of this disorder sounds like a far cry from the Bournemouth of almost 70 years ago. As you can see on your screens there, an absolute jewel in the crown of the great British seaside. But something is going on in Bournemouth. Let's get the eyes and the ears on the ground now, because I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the Bournemouth resident and the former armed services server veteran, Adam Alcock. Adam, welcome to the show. Sadly, when I had you on last time, it was about the fire at the beach. Yep. Many think that was started deliberately. Now there's been a big brawl on the beach. Tell us all about it.
Well, yeah, last week, I was actually in town at the time. There was a large brawl, a lot of younger individuals, mass fight broke out just behind me here on the beach. Just another incident of many that we have in Bournemouth, but this time it was pretty serious, weapons involved, people went to hospital, officers injured, and it's just shocking. But it's not a surprise anymore. The town just has this almost daily reputation of various incidents.
And Adam Alcock, it seems to me that there are out-of-towners coming in to cause chaos, and often they're bringing weapons with them. Rival gangs are getting caught up on your seafront. Residents are getting caught up in the crossfire, as it were. So you've got an issue of out-of-towners coming down and kicking off. And another thing we've spoken about before, of course, is those once amazing guest houses, the hotels on the seafront, which, of course, millions of British tourists flock to, have all been sold off. And they've been bought up by you-know-who, by Serco, by Mears, and now the town has been a dumping ground for asylum seekers. And I understand that in itself is causing anxiety to locals.
It is huge anxiety. I mean, the whole demographic of the town, the dynamic of the place has completely changed in the last 3 years. Yes, we get a lot of people coming out of town, you know, regular British people, and they may come down and have a bit of a scrap on a Saturday night. That's never been any different. That's the odd time. But what we're seeing now is a lot of foreign individuals that have come here, complete lack of respect for law and order. They don't care. They bring their friends along with them. They all meet up down here and they just cause complete carnage. And it is happening on the streets daily. You know, my social media channels are just blowing up. Everyone talks about the same thing. They're frightened. They don't want to go into town. Their kids are unsafe. Businesses are closing down. And the town is not what it used to be, and something needs to be done about it.
And I'm understanding as well, there have been a lot of concerns about women's safety in the town centre, especially after kicking out time clubs. There have been a lot of reports of people hanging around trying to take advantage of them. What are the police doing about this? What are the local media doing about this? Are they taking concern, or are they trying to turn a blind eye?
Sadly, it's a blind eye. I mean, it is complete radio silence from the police. My family, a number of other individuals I know have had direct incidents where this sort of has occurred, and the police are not interested. They would rather brush it under the carpet. There is a complete, it's almost like there's a D notice that's gone out to say to the local press, to anyone, do not talk about this. And you know, there's been incidents recently, and it's only ever like the age of the person that's put out there, you know, a male from Bournemouth. And we've got this complete information vacuum when anything occurs in the town. People don't understand what's happening, and you know there's no description of the person, so people are just left to assume. You know, post Southport, all of that should have stopped. The police should be putting more information out there to basically make the locals appreciate that it is not a problem that is being ignored, and the police will do something about it. But they are nowhere to be seen.
OK, and Adam Alcock, of course, just to reiterate, nobody is saying that everyone that's an asylum seeker in the town is causing trouble. But what you're saying is when you ask for information, it's not forthcoming, and there's a feeling amongst locals there that they are being kind of cast aside and not listened to. Adam Alcock, thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. I wish we could talk about something more positive about what's happening in Bournemouth, but there we go. We're back. Now, Coming up now, what would you shut up? And that's what MPs shouted. Well, actually, Lee Anderson shouted at Nigel Farage in the Commons earlier. Actually, it was Farage, I don't know. They were shouting left, right and centre. Nobody could hear a single thing that Nigel Farage said. Is there a conspiracy to try and silence the Reform UK leader? That's with me, Martin Daubney on GBNews. Now, here's your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Temperatures are on the rise over the next few days. Most of us will see lots of sunshine. That includes the weekend as well. Main exception tomorrow. A bit like today will be the far north of Scotland, where we do have some thick cloud, a bit of rain and drizzle over the Northern Isles and at times over the Western Isles through the night. Most other areas will see the cloud that is about melting away and generally becoming dry with long clear spells. May turn a bit misty in parts of the west through the night, and it'll certainly be quite a warm night across East Anglia and the south east. Temperatures may hold up in the high teens in places. On to Thursday, hot and sunny kind of sums it up, but as always, one or two exceptions. Quite murky around some coasts, South Wales, around the coast of southwest England. Certainly initially the possibility of some mist and low cloud should tend to clear away inland, but it may linger, particularly around these Irish Sea coasts at times. And there'll be generally quite a bit of cloud across Northern Ireland, and certainly the west coast of Scotland starting fairly grey. Some light rain and drizzle here and there, and the potential for a bit more of that light rain to come into parts of the Western Isles as the day goes on. Staying quite breezy in the northwest, but otherwise the winds are pretty light, and as I said, apart from the risk of some mist and low cloud around coast, it's generally going to be dry and sunny, and it's hotting up as well. Temperatures for the first time in this spell likely to get up to 30 degrees, so somewhere across the southeast, many places in the mid to high 20s. A warmer day for Northern Ireland and southern Scotland. It will be cooler in the far northwest. Again here, the possibility across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles of some thicker cloud and the odd little bit of drizzle on Friday. But for most places, it's another hot one on Friday. Again, maybe some mist and low cloud around the Irish Sea coast, perhaps even on the east coast too. The coast will be a bit cooler with sea breezes, but inland, those temperatures ticking up further, more widely into the mid to high 20s, and probably getting hotter still this weekend.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A75 is closed at Creetown due to a collision. Drivers should use diversion routes and allow extra travel time. Roadworks have led to closures on the M4 westbound from Coldra to Tredegar Park. In Lincolnshire, congestion on the A1 northbound is causing 10-minute delays. The A14 eastbound in Suffolk has 40-minute delays between Ipswich West and Ipswich Docks. On the M20 eastbound at Junction 7 in Kent, a broken-down vehicle affects one lane. And on the trains, Great Western Railway services from Newbury to Reading face disruptions, and Hull trains are running a reduced service. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Imagine having an extra £1,000 to spend each week for an entire year. £54,321 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to spend however you like. £54,321 in cash could be landing in your bank account this year. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah.
Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight on the unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace to
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News.
the People's Channel?
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, at PMQs earlier on today, Nigel Farage was harangued and jeered so loudly by opposition MPs it was impossible to even hear his question. Has the Speaker lost control of the Commons? And after Emmanuel Macron subbed the Reform UK leader, is the entire political establishment now biased against him? And on that man there, Emmanuel Macron has blamed his dear Keir Starmer for the small boats crisis. The French president has swiped that unless there is a crackdown on bumper benefit handouts and the prospect of easy work and the black economy in Britain, then the dinghies will never stop leaving France. And do you know what? I think Emmanuel Macron has a point. And a Labour MP has received thousands of pounds in donations from an Indian asylum hotel magnate who's amassed a £500 million fortune built off the back of government contracts. Should MPs be allowed to take such money when their party has pledged to end asylum hotels? And do you remember when Sir Keir Starmer got all muddled up when asked the very simple question, what is a woman?
And have a penis.
Look, I'm not. I don't think we can conduct this debate with, you know.
Sorry, have I offended you in something?
No. It's just.
Yeah, clear as mud, and it still is, because despite the Supreme Court's ruling that a trans woman is not a woman, the Labour Party have put forward a biological man to be a women's officer. Do the Labour Party think they're above the law? Well, to show it's a pleasure to have your company. Astonishing scenes at PMQs earlier on. Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, attempted to ask a question. None of us are any the wiser about what that question was. He was harangued so loudly from MPs around him, and particularly behind him, Zara Sultana, Jeremy Corbyn, the mob behind him. We couldn't hear what he was even saying. Somebody in the chamber even told Nigel Farage to shut up. Surely that's a breach of parliamentary standards. Where was the Speaker? Lindsay Hoyle, normally straight up on his trotters, crying, order, order, barely got involved. Adds to the feeling that Nigel Farage said he was snubbed at the meeting of Emmanuel Macron, snubbed at the buffet dinner. Is this the entire establishment trying to shut down, silence and harass Nigel Farage? Let us know your thoughts. gbnews.com/yoursay is the way to do it. But now it's time for your headlines, and here's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories at 3 minutes past 4. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch pressed Sir Keir Starmer on tax rises at PMQs today, with the Prime Minister committing not to raise income tax, VAT or national insurance on employees as promised in Labour's manifesto. Ms Badenoch also put it to him that he's flirting with calls for a wealth tax.
Mr Speaker, in their manifesto last year, Labour promised not to increase income tax, not to increase national insurance and not to increase VAT. Does the Prime Minister still stand by his promises?
Yes. We are absolutely fixed on our fiscal rules. We remain committed to them. We remain committed to our budget, to our manifesto commitments. I realise that sticking to your fiscal rules and your manifesto commitments is a bit unfamiliar to the party opposite, but it's because of the decisions the Chancellor took, that this government has taken, that we can update the House. £120 billion of inward investment into this country since we took office.
Elsewhere today, French President Emmanuel Macron said France's renewed partnership with the UK was a, quote, game changer. That's as he met with Sir Keir Starmer for talks on issues including the migrant crisis. The French President is currently being hosted by the Prime Minister at number 10 Downing Street. The pair arrived a short while ago, where they'll be hosted today and tomorrow. Mr Macron is demanding tough action to make the UK less attractive to illegal migrant arrivals. The Prime Minister hopes to strike a one-in, one-out deal to send small boat migrants back to the continent in exchange for the UK accepting asylum seekers in Europe who have a British link. That follows President Macron's visit to see King Charles, which culminated in a state banquet last night. The two men bid farewell in Windsor this morning. Victims of the infected blood scandal say they are waiting to die in limbo, with just hundreds having received compensation to date. In a hard-hitting report, the chair of the public inquiry into the disaster, Sir Brian Langstaff, said there were obvious injustices in the way the scheme had been devised. He adds only 460 people had received compensation. It's thought 30,000 people were infected with HIV and hepatitis B or C in the 1970s and 80s after being given contaminated blood products on the NHS. Resident doctors in England will walk out for 5 days later this month. They'll walk off the job from 7 a.m. on the 25th of July in a dispute over pay. That's according to the British Medical Association. More than 26,000 resident doctors voted in favour of strikes. Health Secretary Wes Streeting says he's dismayed that doctors have chosen to strike, adding that he's written to the BMA today to, quote, reaffirm his preference to work together to improve doctors' working lives. Reports suggest Christian Horner has been sacked by the Red Bull Formula One team. Red Bull announced that he'd been released from operational duties and thanked him for his tireless and exceptional work. The British team principal became involved in a scandal last year about texts allegedly sent to a female employee. Mr Horner was twice cleared of wrongdoing following an investigation. Reports in Germany and Holland suggest that Red Bull are negotiating the terms of his departure. The 51-year-old has been in charge of the Formula One team since its inception in 2005, leading them to 8 Drivers' Championships and 6 Constructors' Championship titles. And Greg Wallace has been sacked as presenter of MasterChef after an independent inquiry into allegations of serious misconduct. The decision comes as 50 new claims emerge, including accusations that Wallace groped colleagues and exposed himself to junior staff. He denies the allegations, though admitted some of his past comments had been inappropriate. Those are your latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3588 and €1.1608. The price of gold is £2,430.92 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,862 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Thank you, Gator. If you were watching PMQs earlier on today, then you might not have been able to hear Nigel Farage in the chamber.
And that we demand, the country demands, that you say to the French president... Will you shut up? That you say to the French president, we will not accept undocumented males across the English Channel, and that you are not dictated to by an increasingly arrogant, anti-Brexit French leader.
His proposal for 10 years, wagging the Tory dog, has been to break everything and claim that's how you fix things, to stick 2 fingers up at your neighbours and then expect them to work with us. And he votes against the Borders Bill, which gives more powers to our law enforcement to deal with security at our border. And Mr. Speaker, the reason for that is he has no interest in fixing the problem because he wants to milk it and exploit it. That's the truth about him and his party.
Well, it completely kicked off, and after PMQs, Lee Anderson, the Reform MP for Ashfield, stepped up, calling a point of order after Nigel Farage was heckled by fellow MPs.
Honourable Member for Clacton asked what I thought was quite a reasonable question, because I knew what the question was going to be, but during PMQs, I couldn't hear a single word. I'm sure people in this chamber couldn't, because people like the Honourable Member for Dewsbury behind me never shut up all the way through. Yeah. The Honourable Member for Clacton was trying to ask a reasonable question. Poor old. We do not subscribe to this sort of dog whistle politics in Reform UK. So, Mr. Speaker, could you please give us advice on how to stop this behaviour in the future?
OK, well, I'm now joined in the studio by GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley and also by GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Welcome both to the show. Just a quick point of order there, because during that clip you could quite clearly hear somebody shout, "Will you please shut up?" There was some confusion as to whether that was an MP telling Nigel Farage to shut up, or was it somebody telling the hecklers to shut up? I've just contacted Lee Anderson, and I can confirm he said it was me telling Iqbal to shut up. That is Iqbal Mohammed, the independent pro-Gaza candidate for pro-Palestine candidate for Dewsbury, who sits immediately behind Nigel Farage, just out of sight on that picture there. So the shut up point, Olivia Lee, it wasn't an MP shouting at Nigel Farage. It was Lee Anderson being Lee Anderson and telling them to shut up. Just clarity on that. But on the broader point, do you not think it was just disgraceful that it doesn't matter what you think about Nigel Farage or Jeremy Corbyn or anybody in the House of the Parliament, when they're asking a question, there should be order, there should be discipline, and you should let somebody speak. That didn't happen today. And there's a feeling that the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, lost control of the Commons.
Well, I think it is first worth saying that parliamentary questions is always, PMQs, is always noisy, loud, lots of sort of jousting. That's almost part of the theatre of it all. That's why people tune in to watch on a Wednesday at midday, even if they're not that interested in politics. That said, the Speaker does try and make sure that every MP who wants to ask a question to the Prime Minister is able to do so, that they are at least heard above the din. And at some point, the Speaker normally would chip in when there's interruption like that and say, order, meaning that everyone needs to be quiet so that that Speaker can get their question across. The Speaker didn't intervene today. Now, it's a bit of a mystery as to why that is. Some people are saying that the Speaker is in the Prime Minister's bad books at the moment. There are rumours that it was the Speaker who, well, had an altercation with Rachel Reeves last week and made her cry. Perhaps he is worried for his job because he's in the Prime Minister's bad books, and perhaps that's why he didn't intervene today. I'm just speculating here. We don't quite know. But it was unusual for the Speaker not to intervene. I think it's also worth saying Nigel Nelson here and I were both in the press gallery, and it seemed as though there was something going on with the mics as well. There was a lot of interruption. There was a lot of background noise when Nigel Farage was trying to speak. It's not clear whether Iqbal Mohammed, who was behind him, was being picked up on his microphone or what was going on. But one way or another, it was impossible to hear Nigel Farage's question. It was impossible to hear it in the chamber, and it was impossible to hear it afterwards. And that's a pretty bad state of affairs.
Nigel Nelson, I think Olivia raised an excellent point. Again, people should be free to air their opinions in the House of Commons if you're an elected representative, irrespective of your beliefs. If Nigel Farage or Lee Anderson or anybody else heckled Iqbal Mohammed or Zora Sultana...
In fairness, they don't, by the way.
Yeah, which they don't. One of those pro-Palestine candidates, and shut them down. There'd be absolute outrage.
Yes, there would be.
From the establishment about this, and yet it seems to be routine. They do it to Nigel Farage.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was appalling behaviour. Prime Minister's questions are a bear pit. I mean, there is a lot of noise, a lot of shouting. It's fairly confused. One of the reasons why Keir Starmer didn't notice Rachel Reeves crying when she was actually sitting next to him, because of the way that it's such a bang-bang kind of thing. In this particular case, they should have been shut down. As Olivia says, we're a bit confused about the actual technology, that we could hear quite so much disruption coming through. So it may just be a technical problem, but certainly under normal circumstances, the Speaker would shut that down.
Olivia, Is it simply a matter of technical physics? For example, where Nigel Farage is, behind him, there are rows and rows of people. There's a single big row of people who completely disagree with his politics. And in fact, we have to interrupt, actually. Let's cross now to the British Museum, where the Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the French President Emmanuel Macron are about to speak.
They brought the Bayeux tapestry with them.
OK, so just to let you know the reason for this appearance, of course, it's the full royal state visit for Emmanuel Macron. But the particular point today is the British Museum will be receiving the Bayeux tapestry from France for the first time in 900 years. I wonder, will the Elgin marbles also in the British Museum
well, good afternoon,
be up for discussion?
It's really fantastic to see you here and to just really take in this incredible place that is the British Museum, a world-class institution, which I'm really proud to say is also right in the heart of my constituency. So welcome to my manor. Mr. President Emmanuel, Mrs. Macron, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, you are very, very welcome here, and it is fantastic to see you. We have thousands of visitors here every day from all over the globe to admire the museum's incredible collection of world history all around us here every single day. So it's a real pleasure to welcome two special sets of guests this afternoon, our brilliant French guests and friends who are all here, but also young people representing the next generation. And that is so important as we contemplate our history, because I know just how important access to the arts, to culture and history is for the next generation. Its potential to spark the imagination. There'll be very many people who've come here and had their imagination sparked, and that has put a light on for them and for so many other people, to transform young people's lives by bringing history and culture and art into them, and opening their eyes to new possibilities and opportunities, and encourage them to reach the full extent of their ambitions and their talents. So no matter where you're from or who you are, it's here to bring us together, to remind us of our shared history, but also the common bonds that endure across languages, across borders and cultures. And that's what today is all about, making sure that everyone can appreciate our incredible history, inviting young people to bridge our past and our future, and igniting the passions and the talent of the next generation. And we are celebrating a brilliant initiative today. Everybody is walking around here with a smile on their face, and when the President yesterday announced to both houses what was going to be happening here, there was a great cheer went up, and that was representative, I think, of how this is being felt across the entire country. It is a brilliant initiative, because what Emmanuel, my friend, announced yesterday, this cultural exchange between our two nations, two of the great treasures of our history, the priceless artefacts of Sutton Hoo, which we've just been to see upstairs, absolutely incredible story, incredible artefacts, and the Bayeux tapestry, which means so much. And again, the smiles as people saw just the depiction on the wall behind me as we walked in tells you just how much this means. Because for Sutton Hoo, 1,300 years ago in East Anglia, a wealthy man, we don't know who it was, probably a king, was buried in a lavish funeral ceremony, an Anglo-Saxon era, that of course was put to an end 300 years later by William the Conqueror at the Battle of Hastings. But it is an incredible piece of history that we have here, just imagining what that must have been like, changing our whole perception of that era of history, frankly, and bringing so much learning to us. And of course, the Battle of Hastings, illustrated by the remarkable biotapestry, the beginning of 1,000 years of shared culture that is now defined by mutual admiration and kinship, as well, of course, as by some healthy competition, as anyone who is watching the Euros on Saturday will attest. But that history, that long history, forms the foundation of the European continent as we know it today. Now, both these treasures contain stories of war and of peace, of power and of politics, alliances and enemies, that we still know all too well in our modern world. They show us how connected our countries have always been. They deepen our appreciation of our shared history and enrich the relationship between our two nations today, because we are now entering a new era of world history, a time of huge change and turmoil that has led to insecurity for so many people. And in this new world, our alliances are, in my view, more important than ever. The strength and solidarity of countries that share the same values, the same aims, the same hope for the future. So, just as we stood together in the last century to bring peace to Europe, and it was a real privilege, Emmanuel, to mark Armistice Day in France, walking with you the same route as Churchill and de Gaulle once walked. Thank you so much again for that invitation to be there at that very special moment. And today the UK is proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with France, leading the coalition of the willing to support Ukraine, as well, of course, as working together to call for a sustainable peace in the Middle East. And at home, we're working together for our shared security and prosperity, creating jobs and growth for our people, tackling irregular migration, strengthening our defences to protect Europe from any threats, growing our economies and collaborating on the technologies of the future, and forging closer connections between our peoples with this cultural exchange, giving people across Britain the chance to admire the biotapestry. And there will be so many people who will want to come here to see that as soon as they can. And people across France to enjoy the treasures of ancient England. Well timed for the 1000th anniversary of William the Conqueror's birth in 2027. So as we look back together today, we are also inspired to look forward towards the future and remember that it is for us to write our own chapter of history now as two nations who forged peace, made our people better off, and remained the strongest of allies and the closest of friends. And on that note, it is a pleasure to welcome my friend, Mr. President Emmanuel, to speak to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your words, Mr. Prime Minister, dear Keir, Madam. Honourable Ministers, Mr. President of the British Museum, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, your Prime Minister expressed everything about the importance of this exchange and this cooperation. But allow me just to share a few words. First, to express our great pleasure and honour to be here in this iconic place. Indeed, being in a museum is never something, I would say, innocent. It's always being exposed to not just your culture, but the whole world, even from ancient times. And this is a clear relationship to universalism. And I want to commend you because we were just, informed in details about the project you have for the British Museum and a big, not just restoration, but I would say reinvention of your Western Ring. And on our side, we will try to reinvent a new phase and a new life for Le Louvre, with this Très Grand Louvre, with the same ambition, trying to express not just our vision of the world, but give the opportunity to our fellow citizens and citizens for the entire world to have the experience of beauty, the mystery of beauty, and a better understanding of art, invention, human cultures. And I think this common relation we have, and I do believe that our two countries, and you perfectly expressed it a few minutes ago, Mr. Prime Minister, is a very special relationship with the rest of the world and with universalism. And I think this is a treasure and something we have to cherish. I'm extremely happy to be part of you today because we've worked very hard during the past few years in order to make this exchange possible. And this is not just a potlatch as we made it in ancient times, but something, I think, very inventive. And you know, during decades, I have to say, I have to confess, we did our best not to be put in the situation to make this loan of biotapestry. And we found the best experts of the world to explain in perfect details why it was totally impossible to make such a loan. And believe me, we found them. And believe me, we're going to find them again. But we just decided a few years ago, and I have to pay tribute to your king, because it was a discussion together, and I saw his attachment, his willingness to have this project, and I'm very happy to make it with you, Mr. Prime Minister, dear Keir, my friend. We decided, and I want to thank our two special envoys, Mr. Belaval and Riquet, for the great job you did together on behalf of the two governments and the two nations. Thank you. But I have to say that beyond your work, I want to thank and compliment our two Ministers of Culture, because we went beyond the experts and we managed to find great solutions. So merci, Mesdames les Ministres. And I want to thank the British Museum, because the day you decided not just to welcome the biotapestry, but to say, let's look at certain who, let's look at how we can have, in fact, not just a loan, but exchange, create a new way to show to your people our own treasure. It unlocked everything. And the power of such an institution is wonderful. And I'm very happy about the great relations you have with Le Louvre. And I hope that many projects will be organized by these two highest institutions. And I want to thank Bayeux, his mayor, clearly the museum and the whole team. And from the very beginning, the team, I would say, in Bayeux was very much in support of this approach. And this exchange will be organized between, I speak under your control, June 26 and June 27, broadly speaking, or June, September. And it will be a unique occasion to have millions of visitors coming here and millions of visitors between Rouen and Caen in these two museums to visit precisely and discover certain who and some of the remarkable pieces you just presented to us. So really I want to thank this team who made possible, feasible, these loans and this exchange. My last word is to say, Mr. Prime Minister, you expressed how much important are our links and our future projects for our two countries, for Europe, and in these hectic times, for the rest of the world. And I strongly believe that culture is part of them. I strongly believe that as long as we will have people dedicated to life, to create, to share, to defend culture in our countries, to invent new spaces for that, and to have indeed sculptors, architects, creators, curators, we will be very special for the rest of the world, because there is no equivalent of that. And this type of tools are unbeatable. There is no trade war or tariffs against this kind of approach. And there is no new imperialism vis-à-vis this type of approach, because there is no barriers, there is no borders, by definition. And I'm so happy to see so many young people being here in this museum and working very hard for your culture, our culture, and universalism I mentioned. And you know, I reminded everybody yesterday that obviously the tapestry recounts very epic events, and you refer to them with William the Conqueror, but the story is unfinished, and nobody knows the end. And nobody knows if the end of a tapestry was just once written and presented, or never existed. But this is our work, our duty and our chance to be in this position to finish the tapestry. And to be sure that by allowing the tapestry to take the same road at these warriors, but with another state of mind and in the opposite way, that together we will build a new page of our common history and create a new era based on culture, knowledge, respect, science, and centuries and centuries of enlightenment creations, and I would say friendship. So thank you very much. In a few months' time, to welcome the Bayeux Tapestry. And thank you very much to allow us to welcome, at the same moment, certain who treasures and some of your wonderful pieces of art in Rouen and Caen, because it will be the best symbol of our common work together and the fact that we are totally committed to this work in common, hand in hand, to be sure that the United Kingdom and France will put their energy to build, let's say, a better place, a better world dedicated to these values. Thank you very much.
That was Emmanuel Macron there speaking at the British Museum. And shortly before that, of course, Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, spoke. This event, of course, was to herald what we now know to be an exchange of historic artefacts. We will be receiving the Bayeux Tapestry to the British Museum. There's George Osborne, of course, got out of politics after newspaper editorship and now is in charge of the British Museum. It's interesting in that exchange there how we knew this was going to happen. I put it to you, by the way, that the Bayeux Tapestry, which is a tapestry to commemorate the Norman conquest of the Anglo-Saxons, was actually woven by English women in England. Perhaps there's a good argument to never return it. It's as English as St George, as English as fish and chips. I'm still with Olivia Utley and I'm still with Nigel Nelson. Of course, you say out there, fish and chips isn't English and neither is St George. We have that conversation every St George's Day. Something I picked up on there, Nigel Nelson, straight away. Why was Emmanuel Macron surrounded by 2 European Union flags? It's got nothing to do with the European Union. He's here to represent France. He had 2 of those flags, one either side of it.
He's here to represent both. He's here as a representative of the European Union and obviously as the President of France. And this is the first time we've had an EU leader here for a state visit since Brexit.
He's not an EU leader. He's a member state leader. He's got nothing to do technically on paper with the EU. That was him showing his true colours.
Well, he's the EU leader in the sense that that he's the president of France and therefore a leading member of the EU. So the idea was that he would actually show both. He's already said he regrets the fact that that Brexit took place, but he respects our decision, which I think was fair enough to do.
You don't think that he just had those flags there, almost like to stake them in the ground, to make his stake that at one time, there'll be another star on that flag. This should not be about the European blooming Union. This is meant to be about an exchange of artefacts. This is meant to be from France to Britain. Got nothing to do with Brussels.
Well, I mean, wherever he's gone, he's actually had the EU flag with him. So that has been part of the state visit. You're absolutely right that this specific thing is about swapping the Bayeux tapestry for the Sutton Hoo treasures that we'll send over to France. And you're right, it's done by English women. But in fact, at the time, if you remember, we were all one. So England and Normandy were one nation.
Well, they conquered us in war.
Exactly. That's why we became one nation.
and so, therefore, we can enslave British maiden, the finest crass women in our land.
I have no idea whether they're enslaved or not,
OK, we're not kidding about. We're having a bit of fun. I want to introduce my next guest now, and that's the former French diplomat, Francois-Joseph Chichan. Welcome to the show, Francois-Joseph. Pleasure to have you on. I wanted to ask you about the political debate that's kicking off back here in Britain, and that is, despite calling Sir Keir Starmer Dear Keir both yesterday and today, Emmanuel Macron seems to be blaming Sir Keir Starmer for the small boats crisis, saying there's the huge pull factor of benefits, of guaranteed asylum and black market working, saying it's Sir Keir Starmer's fault. What do you say to that?
Well, it's certainly true that, behind the pomp and the ceremony that we've seen over the past couple of days when the UK welcomed the president yesterday in particular, all of this, it's very clear that there is a positive dynamic in the relationship, but there is always going to be issues that remain problems between the two countries, and among them there is the question of migration, and it's a very, very difficult issue to sort. And the Prime Minister and the President have discussed it today. So I think my view on this is that there is a shared responsibility for both countries to act on this. They can do much more, and I assume that is going to be what's going to be discussed this afternoon and tomorrow as well.
And Francois-Joseph Chichan, it was very telling, I thought, there at the British Museum that Emmanuel Macron repeated that phrase, "We have no borders." There was a huge debate yesterday in Britain because, of course, King Charles talked about there being no borders. And it's like a lot of British people would actually wish that there were more enforcement of borders between France and Britain, more care taken by the gendarmes on the beaches in Calais and all along that strip to make sure that the boats, the dinghies, aren't allowed to leave in the first place. We don't want no borders. We want greater enforcement of the borders we already have.
Yeah, well, I assume the King and the President were talking about cultural borders, and it's true that in terms of cultures, there is a lot of commonalities and things are very close between the two countries. When it comes to the issue of illegal migrants, I think that's right. I think there is a need, and by the way, it's not just the British people, but I think also on the French side, there is an increasing pressure on the government to do more. And indeed, over the past few years, I think it's important to remember that the two countries have done a lot in terms of trying to manage the influx of people at the border. And there are technical measures that are being taken in terms of trying to control the beaches. It's a very long shoreline, remember, on the French side to control, so very difficult, very challenging to control. And the British government has been financially contributing to that as well. But there is only so much you can do in terms of taking these technical measures and controls and having the police there. You also have to address the root causes. And I think this is what I think is lacking in the current dialogue between France and the UK when it comes to managing migration, is what about the root causes? So how do we prevent people actually to get to the shores? And on these issues, there is a shared responsibility. And indeed, the UK government needs to reduce the fact that the UK is a very attractive country for illegal migrants, but also the French side needs to address this by reinforcing controls at the border of the Schengen area that is preventing people to cross the Mediterranean in the first place. So I think a lot of things can be done, more things can be done that matter if they try to address the root causes rather than just managing these people when they are already on the French shores.
Francois Joseph Chichan, we just saw some images there, rare images, rare to the point of being almost unique, of French police slashing some dinghies to prevent them from taking off. It's the first time we've seen it. Maybe it will be the last. There are a lot of people this side of the channel saying, what's the point in giving £500 million a year to the French when the numbers have gone through the roof?
Well, I think what you have to look at also is the numbers of people that have been prevented to cross. And that number is also increasing. So the overall migration pressure is increasing on the French shore, but at the same time, there are measures that have been taken. And what you are seeing on these images are actually regular occurrence. It's not the only method that the French police uses. But what I mean is that the French police is not just stand still there on the shores and they're just looking at the boats just leaving the shores. They are actually actively trying to prevent the crossings. Again, it's a very, very long shoreline, very difficult to police. And, adding money, adding people is not enough. You have to address the root causes.
OK, I agree with you on that point. Thank you very much for joining us, former French diplomat Francois Joseph Chichan. Thank you very, very much. And there's loads more still to come to now, 5 o'clock, including the Labour Party have put forward a biological man to be a women's officer. I'll be joined by the fearless Rosie Duffield next to discuss this.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Temperatures are on the rise over the next few days. Most of us will see lots of sunshine. That includes the weekend as well. Main exception tomorrow. A bit like today will be the far north of Scotland, where we do have some thick cloud, a bit of rain and drizzle over the Northern Isles and at times over the Western Isles through the night. Most other areas will see the cloud that is about melting away and generally becoming dry with long clear spells. May turn a bit misty in parts of the west through the night, and it'll certainly be quite a warm night across East Anglia and the south east. Temperatures may hold up in the high teens in places. On to Thursday, hot and sunny kind of sums it up, but as always, one or two exceptions. Quite murky around some coasts, South Wales, around the coast of southwest England. Certainly initially the possibility of some mist and low cloud should tend to clear away inland, but it may linger, particularly around these Irish Sea coasts at times. And there'll be generally quite a bit of cloud across Northern Ireland and certainly the west coast of Scotland starting fairly grey. Some light rain and drizzle here and there, and the potential for a bit more of that light rain to come into parts of the Western Isles as the day goes on. Staying quite breezy in the northwest, but otherwise the winds are pretty light. And as I said, apart from the risk of some mist and low cloud around coast, it's generally going to be dry and sunny, and it's hotting up as well. Temperatures for the first time in this spell likely to get up to 30 degrees somewhere across the southeast. Many places in the mid to high 20s. A warmer day for Northern Ireland and southern Scotland. It will be cooler in the far northwest. Again here, the possibility across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles of some thicker cloud and the odd little bit of drizzle on Friday. But for most places, it's another hot one on Friday. Again, maybe some mist and low cloud around the Irish Sea coast, perhaps even on the east coast too. The coast will be a bit cooler with sea breezes, but inland, those temperatures ticking up further, more widely into the mid to high 20s and probably getting hotter still this weekend.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Motorists on the M4 westbound should expect delays due to roadworks between junctions 24 Coldra and 28 Tredegar Park, with diversions. Northumberland's A1 southbound is shut between the A1068 and A697 due to a collision, expected to clear by 8:10 tonight. Congestion on the A14 eastbound between junction 55 Copdock and junction 56 Ipswich Docks is causing 30-minute delays, improving after midnight. The M6 northbound between junction 10 and 11 in Walsall has a broken-down vehicle, but it should clear soon. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:43 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. And I've got some breaking news for you now. And a jury at Sheffield Crown Court have found Hassan Django guilty of the murder of the Good Samaritan Chris Marriott. And the father of two, Chris Marriott, was killed on impact by Django, who drove his car at speed towards Chris as he was tending to an injured woman lying in the middle of a Sheffield street after a wedding day ended in violence in December last year. And Anna Riley has this report.
I don't have to say anything, but it may have your defence to do without mention. When questions something which may around in court, anything you do to me, I'm behind your back. I'm behind your back.
This is the moment Hassan Django was arrested. A jury at Sheffield Crown Court later found Django guilty of the murder of husband and father of two, Chris Marriott, who had come to the aid of an unconscious stranger after a wedding day ended in violence. CCTV footage shows Django getting into his car and heading towards a quiet cul-de-sac in the Burngreave area of Sheffield. The prosecution said that he used his vehicle as a weapon by ploughing into 5 people before getting out of the car and attacking another man with a knife. Django's father, Mohammed, was also arrested at the scene for concealing the knife Django used in the stabbing. At the time, GB News spoke to a neighbour who witnessed the aftermath of the attack on the 27th of December 2023.
I found a lot of people gathering around and screaming, and the car crashed into the sign next door, and a lot of fighting over there. I think 6-7 people fighting each other. And then the police came and they lift the car up and they pulled the 2 people underneath. Then later we have heard the news that one of them has passed away. And it is very, very sad, and it's shocking to everyone here, and nobody expected that to happen.
Hassan Django now awaits sentencing at Sheffield Crown Court. Anna Riley, GB News.
There we go. Justice at last in the case of the Good Samaritan murder. Now, next, I'll be speaking to the fearless MP Rosie Duffield as the Labour Party have put forward a biological man to be a women's officer. That's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News.
Who is he? What's he doing there?
They already know who you are, though.
Don't miss this special reunion. Eamon and Anne together again, only on GB News Breakfast this weekend from 6 a.m.
And is that a gardening tan?
No, it's a cypress tan.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Welcome back to Breakfast. Now, experts are warning that lithium suppliers will not keep up with the demand for electric cars.
Yeah, researchers say domestic lithium production could grow as much by about 10 times what it currently is by 2030, but will still fall short of demand.
So this morning we're asking whether Labour's green car policy is unachievable.
This policy tells you everything you need to know about net zero. This isn't about giving people free choices about the technologies they want to use. This is about saying we're going to have mandatory targets. It's a sad indictment on our country if we've just normalised the government making these fundamental decisions for people's lives. The CEBR has warned that this policy might cost the country that's rigid targets for battery electric vehicles, known as the ZEV mandate. 80% of all vehicles will have to be electric vehicles by 2030, rising to 100% by 2035. And that policy is expected to cost £400 billion to the UK economy. And of course, car makers as well have warned that this policy is not achievable.
The latest stats say 47% of vehicles sold in Britain are now EVs. We're halfway there after just 2 years of the electric mandate. We've another 5 years to go. It's speeding up. And this charge that lithium, we're going to have a shortage of lithium, is nonsense. What it says is that there may be the consumption of lithium is increasing, so the domestic production will not be sufficient, but there's plenty in the world.
GB News, the People's Channel.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday Five.
You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah.
Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace to
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News.
the People's Channel?
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:49. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, do you remember when Sir Keir Starmer got all muddled up when asked the question, what is a woman?
Have a penis.
Look, I don't think we can conduct this debate with,
Sorry, have I offended you in something?
No, it's just...
Well, the muddle returns because despite the Supreme Court's ruling that a trans woman is not a woman, the Labour Party have put forward a biological man to be a women's officer. Now, do the Labour Party think they are above the law? Well, I'm joined in the studio by GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, this is absurd. The law, science quite clearly states that a biological, an adult human female is a woman, and I put it to you, to be a women's officer, you should be a biological woman. End of story.
But this is not a breach of the law that she is a woman.
Steph Richards is a biological male.
She's a biological male, but she is also a woman. She's got a gender recognition certificate, which has allowed her to change her gender on her passport and on her birth certificate. So for all official purposes, she's a woman.
OK, well, let's go now to Rosie Duffield, who, of course, is a former Labour MP and now an independent MP for Canterbury, Whitstable and the Villagers. Rosie Duffield. Here we go again. We all thought this was over, but apparently not. You can be a biological man and a women's officer in the Labour Party.
Yeah, I mean, Steph has form. They turn up most weeks to Women and Equality Select Committee, which I sit on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And I don't know, perhaps they don't have a job. But yeah, here we go again with a man, a biological man, attempting to stand as a women's officer. Not a trans officer, a women's officer. And both lesbian Labour and LGB Labour are very unhappy about this.
So, Rosie Duffield, the law seemed to state the obvious. Science has always stated the obvious. You've previously said you believe Sir Keir Starmer has a woman problem. Do you think he still does?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Labour Party traditionally has got a bit of a women problem. I mean, all the resignations we've seen since Keir Starmer's latest government are from women. And we all talk about the lads and the sort of male culture. So, yeah, I mean, it's largely perceived that we do have a bit of a women's issue, yes.
And yet we're still at the position where a biological man with a piece of paper that says they're a woman seems to trump reality, it trumps the Supreme Court, and it trumps science. Will this ever change?
I don't know. I'd like to think that the Supreme Court had made a difference legally, and I think there are some groups considering legal action if the Labour Party don't redress this, and they should do, because it was made very clear that women's positions and women's spaces are not anything to do with those certificates. They're for biological women for those purposes, and that includes women's officers. There are lots of other roles I'm sure that Steph could occupy, but not women's officer.
So, Rosie, presumably the Labour Party would never, in a month of Sundays, I don't know, allow a white person to be a black person's officer. So why do they seem to think that a biological man can be a woman's officer?
I guess because those involved with LGBT Labour, they're the ones that spent quite a few years trying to get me thrown out of the party and complaining about every time I liked a tweet when we could tell in those days. I think that they don't agree with the Supreme Court judgment and the ruling. Therefore, they don't agree with the Equality Act, which we passed in 2010.
And Rosie, do you feel liberated now to be no longer a part of the Labour Party? When you see stories like this, you think, thank goodness I'm gone.
Yes, I really do, because it is just a weight off my shoulders. It's not directly my problem anymore. It's annoying, but there are lots of other people left who have got to sort this out. And until it is all sorted out, I wouldn't dream of rejoining the Labour Party.
Well, you know, Rosie Duffield, I'll tell you what, you know, I can actually just tell by looking at you. Like you're sort of smiling about this now in a way like it really took a toll on you, all this stuff before, right? But you seem to be in a very different place now.
Yeah, I do feel free, Martin. I think also I can vote, you know, as per my conscience and my constituents. And I've seen lots of my colleagues that are left in Labour having to really vote against what they believe in, and that's horrible for them.
OK, well, Rosie Duffield, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. It truly is.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today as the stuff continues. Now, coming up next at PMQs today, Nigel Farage was jeered so loudly by opposition MPs it was impossible to even hear his question. In fact, Lee Anderson had to tell Iqbal Mohammed, an independent behind him, to shut up. Is it all fun and games, or is it simply unacceptable? And has Lindsay Hoyle lost control of the House of Commons? That's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. First, though, here's your weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Temperatures are on the rise over the next few days. Most of us will see lots of sunshine. That includes the weekend as well. Main exception tomorrow. A bit like today will be the far north of Scotland, where we do have some thick cloud, a bit of rain and drizzle over the Northern Isles and at times over the Western Isles through the night. Most other areas will see the cloud that is about melting away and generally becoming dry with long clear spells. May turn a bit misty in parts of the west through the night, and it'll certainly be quite a warm night across East Anglia and the south east. Temperatures may hold up in the high teens in places. On to Thursday, hot and sunny kind of sums it up, but as always, one or two exceptions. Quite murky around some coasts, South Wales, around the coast of southwest England. Certainly initially the possibility of some mist and low cloud should tend to clear away inland, but it may linger, particularly around these Irish Sea coasts at times. And there'll be generally quite a bit of cloud across Northern Ireland, and certainly the west coast of Scotland starting fairly grey. Some light rain and drizzle here and there, and the potential for a bit more of that light rain to come into parts of the Western Isles as the day goes on. Staying quite breezy in the northwest, but otherwise the winds are pretty light, and as I said, apart from the risk of some mist and low cloud around coast, it's generally going to be dry and sunny, and it's hotting up as well. Temperatures for the first time in this spell likely to get up to 30 degrees, so somewhere across the southeast, many places in the mid to high 20s. A warmer day for Northern Ireland and southern Scotland. It will be cooler in the far northwest. Again here, the possibility across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles was some thicker cloud and the odd little bit of drizzle on Friday. But for most places, it's another hot one on Friday. Again, maybe some mist and low cloud around the Irish Sea coast, perhaps even on the east coast too. The coast will be a bit cooler with sea breezes, but inland, those temperatures ticking up further, more widely into the mid to high 20s, and probably getting hotter still this weekend.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. All lanes on the A1 southbound between the A1068 and the A697 in Northumberland are closed due to an incident. In Cheshire West and Chester, the M6 southbound has one lane closed, clearing by 5:27 this evening. Staffordshire's A50 eastbound sees delays adding about 10 minutes. The A31 eastbound suffers lane closures from a collision. The M25 anti-clockwise in Surrey has one lane shut, leading to congestion. And on the trains, cross-country services between Leicester and Nuneaton face disruption. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show at PMQs earlier, Nigel Farage was harangued and jeered so loudly by opposition MPs on the row behind him, it was impossible to even hear his question. As the Speaker lost control of the Commons and after Macron snubbed the Reform UK leader, is the entire political establishment seemingly biased against him. Now, Emmanuel Macron has blamed his dear Keir Starmer for the small boats crisis. Well, the French president has swiped that unless there is a crackdown on bumper benefit handouts and the prospect of easy work in the black economy in Britain, then the dinghies will never stop leaving France. And guess what? Many people think Macron has a point. Now, do you remember when Sir Keir Starmer got all muddled up when asked the simple question, what is a woman?
And have a penis.
Nick, I'm not... I don't think we can conduct this debate with, you know...
Sorry, have I offended you in something?
No, it's just...
And now the muddle has returned because despite the Supreme Court ruling that a trans woman is not a woman, the Labour Party have put forward a biological man to be a women's officer. The Labour think they're above the law. And we'll be crossing live to the White House any minute now as the US President Donald Trump will be meeting with African leaders. Will the encounter be another epic car crash to match that fantastic Trump v Zelensky meltdown? We'll be there live. Well, Michelle, pleasure to have your company. Chaos in the chamber earlier on as Nigel Farage attempted to ask a PMQ. I've listened to it now 5 or 6 times. I'm still none the wiser. I'm joined in the studio by Nigel Nelson and Olivia Utley. They were both there. They can't even tell me what was said. It was simply harangued and heckled out of existence. Now, here's my point. You can disagree with Nigel Farage. You can disagree with Jeremy Corbyn, anybody in the chamber. But you should be quiet when they speak so the public can decide. Are you one of those people at home like me who thinks every time they jeer and leer like it's a circus act, they want to turn the hose pipe on them? Shut up and let us listen. In fact, Lee Anderson shouted shut up to Iqbal Mohammed, the independent pro-Palestine MP for Dewsbury, who was behind Mr Farage on his shoulder. And was the House totally out of order? Lindsay Hoyle seemed to lose control. Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. But now's your headlines, and here's Katie Bowen.
Martin, thank you. The top stories at 5:03. The small boats crisis is, quote, a shared priority that requires shared solutions. Sir Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron have agreed as they met earlier today, Downing Street has said this afternoon. Earlier, the French president said France's renewed partnership with the UK was a game changer as he met with the PM in number 10 for talks. The pair will be hosted there today and tomorrow as discussions on the migrant crisis continue. Mr Macron is demanding tough action to make the UK less attractive to illegal migrant arrivals. As the Prime Minister hopes to strike a one-in, one-out deal to send small boat migrants back to the continent in exchange for the UK accepting asylum seekers in Europe who have a British link. Also today, the Prime Minister says we are now entering a new era of world history, as he joined the French President at the British Museum to mark France loaning the Bayeux tapestry back to the UK. As part of the announcement, the Sutton Hoo artefact will be loaned to France in a cultural exchange next year. Also today, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch pressed Sir Keir Starmer on tax rises at PMQs, with the Prime Minister committing not to raise income tax, VAT or national insurance on employees, as promised in Labour's manifesto. Ms Badenoch also put it to him that he's flirting with calls for a wealth tax.
Mr Speaker, in their manifesto last year, Labour promised not to increase income tax, not to increase national insurance and not to increase VAT. Does the Prime Minister still stand by his promises?
Yes. We are absolutely fixed on our fiscal rules. We remain committed to them. We remain committed to our budget, to our manifesto commitments. I realise that sticking to your fiscal rules and your manifesto commitments is a bit unfamiliar to the party opposite, but it's because of the decisions the Chancellor took, that this government has taken, that we can update the House. £120 billion of inward investment into this country since we took office.
Victims of the infected blood scandal say they are waiting to die in limbo, with just hundreds having received compensation to date. In a hard-hitting report, the chair of the public inquiry into the disaster, Sir Brian Langstaff, said there were obvious injustices in the way that the scheme had been devised. He adds only 460 people had received compensation. It's thought 30,000 people were infected with HIV and hepatitis B or C in the 1970s and 80s after being given contaminated blood products on the NHS. Resident doctors in England will walk out for 5 days later this month. They'll walk off the job from 7 a.m. on the 25th of July in a dispute over pay, the British Medical Association said today. More than 26,000 resident doctors voted in favour of the strikes. Health Secretary Wes Streeting says he's dismayed that doctors have chosen to strike, adding that he's written to the BMA today to, quote, reaffirm his preference to work together to improve their working lives. Reports suggest Christian Horner's been sacked by the Red Bull Formula One team. Red Bull announced that he had been released from operational duties and thanked him for his tireless and exceptional work. The British team principal became involved in a scandal last year about texts allegedly sent to a female employee. Mr Horner was twice cleared of wrongdoing following an investigation. Reports in Germany and Holland suggest that Red Bull are negotiating the terms of his departure. The 51-year-old has been in charge of the Formula One team since its inception in 2005, leading them to 8 Drivers' Championships and 6 Constructors' Championship titles. And Greg Wallace has been sacked as presenter of MasterChef after an independent inquiry into allegations of serious misconduct. The decision comes as 50 new claims emerge, including accusations that Wallace groped colleagues and exposed himself to junior staff. He denies the allegations, though admitted some of his past comments had been inappropriate. Those are your latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3583 and €1.1603. The price of gold is £2,434.17 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,868 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Thank you, Katie. Now, if you were watching PMQs earlier on today, then you might not have been able to hear what Nigel Farage was saying in the chamber.
And that we demand, the country demands, that you say to the French president, will you shut up? You say to the French president, we will not accept undocumented males across the English Channel, and that you are not dictated to by an increasingly arrogant, anti-Brexit French leader.
His proposal for 10 years, wagging the Tory dog, has been to break everything and claim that's how you fix things, to stick two fingers up at your neighbours and then expect them to work with us. And he votes against the Borders Bill, which gives more powers to our law enforcement to deal with security at our border. And Mr. Speaker, the reason for that is he has no interest in fixing the problem because he wants to milk it and exploit it. That's the truth about him and his party.
Well, next, Reform UK's Lee Anderson stepped up, calling for a point of order after Nigel Farage was heckled by MPs.
Honourable Member for Clacton asked what I thought was quite a reasonable question, because I knew what the question was going to be, but during PMQs, I couldn't hear a single word. I'm sure people in this chamber couldn't, because people like the Honourable Member for Dewsbury behind me never shut up all the way through. The Honourable Member for Clacton was trying to ask a reasonable question. We do not subscribe to this sort of dog whistle politics in Reform UK. So, Mr. Speaker, could you please give us advice on how to stop this behaviour in the future?
Well, it royally kicked off, and discuss it. I'm joined in the studio by GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley, GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and I'm delighted to be joined by the former Minister of State for Legal, Migration and Borders, Tom Pursglove. Welcome to you all. I'm going to start with you, Olivia Utley. So, you were in the press gallery. You were also in the press gallery, Nigel Nelson, earlier on. You couldn't make out what was going on. I listened to it 5 times afterwards. I couldn't hear what was going on. I put it to you, there should be standards in the chamber. It doesn't matter if you agree with Nigel Farage or anybody else in there. You should let them talk. That didn't happen. It was complete and utter chaos.
Well, rightly or wrongly, I mean, part of the theatre of PMQs is that it's very noisy. There is a lot of sort of jousting. I think quite a lot of people watching at home really hate that element of it, but that is the way it has always been. That said, Nigel Farage does often seem to get quite a lot more flack than other MPs. And it seemed today that there were 2 things really going on. I thought, and I think Nigel did too, Nigel Nelson here, that there was something going on with the microphones. It might have been that Iqbal Mohammed, the independent MP for Dewsbury, who was behind Nigel, was being picked up on Nigel Farage's microphone. It felt like there was a lot of interference going on, not clear what was happening there. The other thing, which is perhaps more significant, is where was the Speaker? What was he doing? Lindsay Hoyle is generally really liked by MPs on all sides of the House for the approach he's taken to his role after the John Bercow years. He does normally call order when things are getting a bit too noisy. He does normally make sure that every MP is able to be heard in PMQs. There is a rumour that, and I'm just speculating here, that Lindsay Hoyle is a little bit worried for his own job, that he's worried that he's annoyed the government here. Of course, there was that rumour that there was an altercation between Hoyle and Rachel Reeves that caused the Chancellor to break down in tears last week, and possibly the Speaker was essentially allowing Nigel Farage to have a hard time to try and get back in Keir Starmer's good books. It's not quite clear, but, you know, we've been talking about it on the show all afternoon. Lots and lots of people up and down the country, lots of Reform voters, I expect, feel very annoyed about this. So perhaps Nigel Farage is going to have a bit of an easier ride going forwards in PMQs.
Nigel Nelson, just to repeat, you were there, you couldn't hear what was going on, and somebody shouted, "Will you shut up?" during that. I contacted Lee Anderson. It was Lee Anderson who said, "Will you shut up?" to that gentleman, Iqbal Mohammed, independent pro-Palestine MP for Dewsbury. Of course, they all now sit directly behind Reform UK. So you've got Mohammed, you've got Zara Sultani, you've got Jeremy Corbyn, you've got the other pro-Palestine mob in that corner, and they're giving out a lot of volume. Is that what it is, to be charitable? Is it just the microphone getting blinded out by their heckling behind? And if it is that, is it a microphone issue, or actually should the Speaker be telling them to pipe down? Let the guy talk.
Certainly the Speaker should be telling them to pipe down. I mean, certainly PMQs is the nearest thing that politics comes to showbiz. It's meant to be a pantomime. It's meant to be sort of very rumbustious. But the important thing is, and this is one thing that Lindsay Hoyle is very good at normally, is to make sure that MPs are heard, especially if they're backbenchers. And this didn't happen in this case because we lost Nigel Farage right from the beginning of his question. There could have been something wrong with the system. I've never heard it quite like that before, where I've been able to pick up an MP even nearby quite as loudly.
But it will add fuel to the fire. Like yesterday, I was like, Reform UK leader isn't invited to the Macron speech.
Nor should he have been
in chamber.
No,
he wasn't invited to the buffet. There's this talk about he's been frozen out by the establishment. This won't help if you can't even have his voice heard during
that is certainly the job of the Speaker. I don't think he was frozen out, being frozen out by the establishment. He didn't meet Macron because the parliamentary party is 4 MPs. Macron couldn't start meeting everybody, otherwise it'd be like a dentist waiting room. He'd have to go and see the Greens, the SNP. What Macron came here to do was to meet the leaders of the 3 main parties.
Yeah, maybe meeting those people might be like going to the dentist. I digress. Tom Pursglove, of course, you've spoken many times in chamber over the years. What would your advice be to Nigel Farage?
I've been heckled and shouted at over the years from opponents and probably occasionally colleagues in the House when I've spoken. Look, it's one of those things that you don't want to be complaining about it because that'll probably only make it worse. You just have to plough on. But I do accept that it never comes across very well to the public when you're struggling to hear people. But it seems a bit today that the technical has met with some heckling and that it's created a kind of unacceptable, undesirable situation. And, actually, I do think that politicians should think a bit about how these things look to the public because people do want a proper debate.
OK, good. Let's get to our next story now, if we could. Because, of course, we've all been talking about the deal, or the lack of, this one-in, one-out deal with Emmanuel Macron. Of course, he is still on his second day of the full royal state visit, and it's kicked off despite calling him Dear Keir twice now. In fact, it is quite dear Keir to give £500 million to the French a year. I digress. Dear Keir, Macron put the boot in, blaming Sir Keir Starmer for the small boats crisis.
Well, it's a funny old story, this, because it feels as though President Macron is a bit of a hero of Brexiteers over the last couple of days. He is saying that the UK government is in part responsible for the influx of small boats crossing the Channel because of the pull factors that migrants have when they're coming to the UK. So, for example, he said that it's very, very easy for migrants coming over to the UK illegally to get into the black market, the jobs black market, although, of course, it is technically illegal for asylum seekers to work in the UK. Lots and lots of them manage to work in the UK, particularly in the gig economy. He actually pointed out that 1/3 of all migrants entering the Schengen area are trying to get to the UK, and he says that that is the problem. There are French politicians who disagree with Emmanuel Macron who actually say that there is a problem with people getting into the Schengen area. It isn't just those crossing the Channel, but that is the point that Macron's making, that it's too nice a life for migrants in the UK at the moment. And until the UK addresses those root causes, until the UK addresses those pull factors, we can keep throwing money at the French, but they won't be able to stop it. It'll be fascinating to see what Keir Starmer will do about that.
Let's bring you back in, Tom Pursglove, of course, former Minister of State for Legal Migration and the Border. This might be one of those rare events to the point of being unique. You actually agree with Emmanuel Macron?
I struggle to agree with Emmanuel Macron on much of this. I think the French could be doing way more to stop these boats.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that go on are tinkering at the edges. I welcome that slightly more in-depth involvement that we've seen from the French gendarmes in recent days with the popping of that boat, but they massively need to scale that. And ultimately, it is within his gift to shut this whole thing down. The whole issue of channel crossings that people are so concerned about is within his gift to shut down, because if you were to take back anybody that arrived, if we were to detain them and they were to be returned immediately to France, you'd put a whole stop to this thing overnight.
but there's no way that they would agree to that. And actually, there have been a bunch of EU states where the arrivals first land in the Schengen zone: Italy, Cyprus, Malta, Greece, who said they won't agree to any such deal because a returns deal with Britain, between Britain and France, would mean going back to potentially the first entry point. And so here we are again. It's like we're unable to do deals with European Union member states because the other ones simply won't have it.
Well, the truth is that this is the greatest country on earth, and I can completely understand why people want to come here. But the truth is that not everybody can, and people who come illegally certainly shouldn't be getting to the United Kingdom. And the fact that people believe that if they get here that they can stay is a massive pull factor. The one-in, one-out deal that's being talked about, again, just will not live up to the scale of energy and intervention that is needed to address this. I would argue it just acts as a means of pulling people round between us and France. People who fail will come back. It just isn't going to work.
But Tom Purcell, Emmanuel Macron does have a point when he talks about the generous welfare payments. Well, certainly the free hotels, the free meals, the free heating. And I put it to you that this happened under the Conservative government too. So long as we have that pull factor, we'll never stop the dinghies.
And it's why I believe that we have to do whatever is necessary to be able to return people or relocate people who arrive by a small boat. My personal view on this is that you are not going to stop this unless, upon arrival, you detain people, relocate them to a third safe country like Rwanda, or remove them back to France. And actually, I would argue that would be a huge benefit to the French as well, because what you would see is people not then making those journeys across France to try and get to those northern French beaches. And that would then see that problem alleviate itself very considerably in Europe as well, because we know that a very significant chunk of these people want to get to the UK. I think we should obviously be doing more around illegal working. We talked on your programme about that before, around the issue of food delivery companies, and actually I think they should be using tech and making sure that every possible step is taken to put a stop to that. We shouldn't be doing anything that encourages people to come to the UK in that way. OK, Nigel Nelson, let's bring you in now. We've been having this conversation. It feels like an endless Groundhog Day. And this was meant to be a breakthrough moment. This was meant to be Dear Keir and Emmanuel Macron having a bit of a bromance, coming up with a solution, something that will benefit the British people. And the next day, Emmanuel Macron's putting the boot into Keir Starmer. Isn't the point is it's a constant game of pass the buck, of dodging responsibility, and Rishi Sunak couldn't stop this. It sunk the Tory government. At the moment, Sir Keir Starmer, it's getting worse. And if he doesn't get a grip on this, it's going to sink the Labour Party too.
Well, I think we have to be realistic. You are not going to stop the boats, and certainly not for a long time. So we've got to live with it. The important thing is how you reduce the numbers coming through. So far, it hasn't happened.
It's gone up 40%.
It has, yes. So that if the smashing the gangs thing starts working, there are 80 investigations going on. If those come to fruition, you'll start to do that.
You think that's going to make any difference? It's a game of whack-a-mole.
Well, it may be a game of whack-a-mole, but the more moles you whack, the more dents you put.
When's the whacking going to start? 40% increase under Sir Keir Starmer.
This is where the next bit comes in, which is the one-in, one-out scheme. I mean, what Tom says about sending everyone back to France, we can't do that. We've got to do a deal with France. We can't just export everyone back.
You've got a deal with France. £500 million a year.
Yeah, but the idea that you'd actually send everyone back without French agreement is just not going to work. If you've got a system of one in, one out, it won't change the numbers, I appreciate. What it will do is that some people will be able to find safe routes where they would have crossed the channel in a small boat.
It won't It's a merry-go-round
so the
of
smugglers
migrants.
get less business.
It's a merry-go-round of migrants. It's one in, one out. It won't solve the problem whatsoever. It might make politicians look good, but it won't satiate the electorate.
The problem with it is it acts as an even bigger magnet for people to try to get to France to come to the UK, because at the moment, if you're attempting those journeys, you're effectively doing so on the basis that you are wanting to get to the UK illegally. If you say that some of those people can come legally to the UK, how is that right? How is that fair? If you have proper control of your borders, you can be generous when it comes to your safe and legal routes. I would actually argue that the most deserving people are people who often can't make those journeys in the way that often those people that are getting across to France are able to do. So it's just, from every level, the wrong policy response to this, and it won't work because it won't cut the numbers. I actually think it's got a risk of increasing numbers.
OK, thank you very much for joining us. Tom Pursglove, Nigel Nelson and, of course, Olivia Utley. Superb as ever. Thank you all. Now, next, a new poll predicts that Reform UK could win in the Welsh Parliament if an election was held tomorrow. So is the turquoise tidal wave crossing the borders into the valleys? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The 12th, a day to celebrate history, community and family here in Northern Ireland. Join me, Arlene Foster.
And me, Dougie Beattie, as we bring you live coverage of the July 12th celebrations.
Right across the United Kingdom. It's all happening here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 5:26. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, could Reform UK win in the Welsh election? Of course, that is in next May, because yet another poll is suggesting that Labour will come behind Reform UK and Plaid Cymru at next May's Senedd election. As you can see on your screen now, the new poll by More in Common is the second poll now to project Reform could be the biggest party in Wales. And it comes as the Welsh First Minister and the Labour leader Baroness Morgan admitted that Reform posed a very serious threat to her party. Well, I can now speak with the group leader for Reform UK and the Torfan Council. That's Councillor David Thomas. David, always a pleasure to have your company. So another poll has put in Reform UK in front. Tell us about the numbers.
Well, look, yesterday it was like a celebration in Wales. We had phone calls, we had people messaging us. It was like we'd already won the election yesterday, Martin. The people can see now that there's an absolute solid chance of us completely taking the Welsh Parliament now in May 2026. And the people have got something seriously now to look forward to. And we can't wait for the elections to come forward now in May.
Just look at the percentage of the votes there, as you can see on your screens. This is for next May's prediction. If there are elections held tomorrow, which of course there won't be, it's next May, Reform on 28%, Plaid Cymru in second position, 26%, Labour Party on 23%, and the Tories dropping away to 10%. And a fascinating thing that came out of this, Councillor David Thomas, is that 48% of those who voted for the Labour Party in July 2024 would no longer back the Labour Party in the future election. So half of Labour Party's vote has simply fallen away. What's going on?
Well, I can tell you now, Martin, that the next poll that comes out will be even bigger again. Like I've just said, the people in Wales actually have a real alternative for change here. And it's only the beginning of what these numbers are going to look like. And I truly believe, I said this to you before in a previous interview, you may well remember, that we would take the Senate in 2026. And we are absolutely on course to do that. And look, come to Wales, come into some of our working men's clubs, come and have a beer. You'll see that the people there are not just raving for Reform UK, they can't wait for it. They're longing for it. They want to see change. They're desperate for it. 26 years of Labour rule is going to be decimated in those elections come May 2026. And I can't wait.
But of course, Councillor Thomas, there's a huge amount of pressure on the party. There are 11 councils now being ran over in England. But of course, running a country will be a very, very serious proposition. You're a small party at the moment in Wales. Are you convinced that you could run a country? It's easy in opposition, but as Sir Keir Starmer has found out, it's very, very difficult in power. Could Reform UK be trusted to run Wales?
Well, just look at yesterday. I mean, with David Jones defecting to Reform. I mean, David Jones, former cabinet minister, former Welsh secretary, full of experience, joins Reform. I mean, David Jones can see what we can all see in Wales, that Labour's Wales is broken and it's getting worse day by day. And, you know, when someone like David Jones, who's been loyal to the Tories for 50 years, leaves and joins Reform, that tells you one thing and one thing only, that the Tories are finished.
OK, well, Councillor David Thomas, we've got a second piece of polling in this same poll. This is for the Wales Westminster voting intention. So this means if there were a general election tomorrow across the entire nation, it's even better for Reform. Reform is on 33% in Wales. Labour now drops down to 20%. Plaid Cymru 16%, Conservatives 12%, Liberal Democrats on 10%. So for a general election, it seems to be even better news for Reform UK.
It's the Turkish it's the turquoise takeover, isn't it? Turquoise takeover, Martin. The people don't want the same old parties anymore. They want something new. They want something fresh. They want common sense. And this is what Reform is offering. We're here for the people and for this country. And that is why you're seeing these large numbers now in these polls.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us. That's the group leader for Reform UK and Torfan Council, Councillor David Thomas. Thanks for joining us. Nigel Nelson, some reaction to you. I mean, it's just a poll. But unlike the polls in for the whole of the country, the election is now only about 10 months away. But no doubt you're going to say it's a huge, huge task to run a country.
Yes, it is a huge task, and I think that if Reform did actually win and win total control, I'm not sure they can, by the way, under the new system they've got in Wales. But if they could, we would see how Reform would govern a country. They've got 10 councils, they've got 3 mayors, but this would be running one of the UK nations.
And of course, it's proportional representation in these Senate votes, so they definitely will get people into power. I guess the big challenge then would be, could they hold office in a way, because undeniably the local elections across the councils in England were a stepping stone. This is another huge stepping stone. At the same time, of course, there's the Holyrood elections in Scotland, and it was seen as a barometer. Are you convinced that there's enough talent in Reform UK in Wales to run a country. But let's face it, it's been ran pretty badly by the Labour Party these past few years. People are fed up with it.
Well, that depends on your point of view. I think Labour have been running it for a long time. I don't think that they've done a bad job over there. I think the issue in Wales is that, first of all, they're changing the system. You used to have 60 representatives, now we're going to 96. What is likely to happen, and what these polls are showing, is the Reform might be the largest party, but they might not be the governing party. All you would need is two other parties to form a coalition, and they'd run the country anyway.
And it's worth pointing out the Labour Party leader there said they wouldn't touch a coalition with Reform UK with a barge pole. So you're saying there could be a cosy backroom deal to keep Reform out of power?
Yes. And so if Labour decide
even if they won the most votes?
Yes, that in the event that Labour decided to hook up with the Welsh nationalists, they could actually govern themselves. But, I mean, we have to see how it pans out. There are 10 months to go. These polls might increase and Reform's share might go up considerably.
OK, thank you very much, Nigel Nelson. Plenty more to come throughout the rest of the show, but first, here's your traffic and your travel update.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Road users face significant delays today. A collision on the M6 southbound between junction 8 and 7 closes one lane, causing delays. The A14 eastbound between junction 54 Ipswich West and 56 Ipswich Docks has 20-minute congestion. In Surrey, drivers on the M25 anti-clockwise between junction 9 and 8 encounter a 40-minute delay. Westbound travellers on the M4 face diversions between junction 24 Coldra and 28 Tredegar Park due to roadworks. And on the trains, cross-country services are disrupted between Leicester and Nuneaton. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. The headlines at 5:34. The small boats crisis is, quote, a shared priority that requires shared solutions, Sir Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron have agreed as they met earlier today, Downing Street said. Meanwhile, authorities in the south of France say severe wildfires in the region are now under control, although flare-ups are still possible. Residents are no longer in lockdown. Greg Wallace has been sacked as the presenter of MasterChef after an independent inquiry into allegations of serious misconduct. He denies the allegations, though admitted some of his past comments had been inappropriate. Thousands of cases that would normally be heard in front of a jury should be decided by judges alone. That's according to recommendations made by a former senior judge. And Queen Camilla visited Wimbledon earlier today and met with 7-time champion Novak Djokovic. Those are the headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Temperatures are on the rise over the next few days. Most of us will see lots of sunshine. That includes the weekend as well. Main exception tomorrow. A bit like today will be the far north of Scotland, where we do have some thick cloud, a bit of rain and drizzle over the Northern Isles and at times over the Western Isles through the night. Most other areas will see the cloud that is about melting away and generally becoming dry with long clear spells. May turn a bit misty in parts of the west through the night, and it'll certainly be quite a warm night across East Anglia and the south east. Temperatures may hold up in the high teens in places. On to Thursday, hot and sunny kind of sums it up, but as always, one or two exceptions. Quite murky around some coasts, South Wales, around the coast of southwest England. Certainly initially the possibility of some mist and low cloud should tend to clear away inland, but it may linger, particularly around these Irish Sea coasts at times. And there'll be generally quite a bit of cloud across Northern Ireland and certainly the west coast of Scotland starting fairly grey. Some light rain and drizzle here and there, and the potential for a bit more of that light rain to come into parts of the Western Isles as the day goes on. Staying quite breezy in the northwest, but otherwise the winds are pretty light, and as I said, apart from the risk of some mist and low cloud around coast, it's generally going to be dry and sunny and it's hotting up as well. Temperatures for the first time in this spell likely to get up to 30 degrees somewhere across the southeast. Many places in the mid to high 20s. A warmer day for Northern Ireland and southern Scotland. It will be cooler in the far northwest. Again here, the possibility across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles of some thicker cloud and the odd little bit of drizzle on Friday. But for most places, it's another hot one on Friday. Again, maybe some mist and low cloud around the Irish sea coast, perhaps even on the east coast too. The coast will be a bit cooler with sea breezes, but inland those temperatures ticking up further, more widely into the mid to high 20s and probably getting hotter still this weekend.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
And
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:39. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a public inquiry has found that the Horizon IT scandal had disastrous consequences that possibly contributed to at least 13 suicides. Of course, this is the post office scandal, and victims and families are now set to receive compensation as the post office issued an unreserved apology. Well, joining me now is the branch secretary for the Communication Workers Union, Mark Baker. Mr. Baker, welcome to the show. It seems incredible this is still rattling on all this time later, despite the promise to get things sorted out, and heartbreaking news of 13 suicides now linked to this.
Yes, it's becoming a scandal all in its own right. It's gone on for far too long. And I think people now are just saying enough with all these excuses. There needs to be a concerted effort by government at the highest level, if necessary, to bring this to a swift conclusion. I am not buying into these stories about, oh, it's complicated. These things take time. People are dying. You're right. There have been these suicide, and I think the numbers that have Sir Wynne and his inquiry have revealed have taken everyone by surprise. I don't think even long-serving insiders like myself were quite aware that there had been so many.
We're hearing even today in the tainted blood scandal of thousands of people dying before they receive payments, and people are literally living in limbo, unable to move on with their lives, and it's exactly the same for the postmasters. Devastated lives, and they just deserve justice, and they just deserve that resolution, and they just deserve that compensation.
They certainly do, and there's nothing to be gained by the government in this delay, because they're going to have to pay the money. What's the point in waiting until someone has passed away? Because a claim will continue regardless. The members of the family, the executors of the estate of deceased postmasters will continue with the claim. So the government are going to have to pay eventually. And this is what it's boiled down to, money. And it's to delay having to pay these what will be larger claims. And the government are doing everything they can to try and buy as much time for themselves as possible at the expense of ordinary people who have done no wrong. It's been proved now beyond any doubt at all they didn't do what they were accused of. We really do need this brought to a swift conclusion. And at times like this, we do have to look to our politicians to say, do what you have to do to get the money to these people. Let them enjoy, those that are still alive. This goes for the infected blood victims as well. Let them enjoy what time they have left. It's cruel, and it's a sort of thing that must be brought to an end right away.
OK, Mark Baker, thank you so much for joining us today on GB News, the Postmasters Branch Secretary for the Communication Workers Union. And let's now also speak with a victim of the post office scandal. That's Christopher Had, who was wrongly accused of stealing £88,000, and he's still yet to receive any compensation. And he says he suffered from mental health problems because of it, and I'm not surprised. Christopher Had, welcome to the show. Do you think that the government is simply trying to kick the can down the road simply to save money?
Look, I think I think that has been, of course, the action over both governments, hasn't it? The previous government that was responsible for, now the new government taking over last year. It's just delay. Like Mark said, they call it complicated, but it's only complicated of their own making. There's many other avenues that could have been taken in order to address this much quicker. Like we suggested that they could have put a couple of experts involved to assess the claims and taken the average of them or something. There's many other things, much more creative ways they could have come up with to resolve this, rather than the natural, usual way of adversarial lawyers battling out on both sides, which obviously just runs up the cost, and obviously it takes years. My claim went in June 2023, and here we still are, still waiting. So.
And Chris, you say your mental health suffered after being wrongly accused of stealing £88,000. You've clearly been exonerated of that. Tell us about the kind of impacts this has had on your life.
Yeah, look, it's obviously, I was the youngest postmaster back in 2006 at 18, and the business was thriving. Every year the business was growing, and then be accused of that. I said, you're the pillar of the community, aren't you? So everybody knows who you are, even if they don't use the post office. And you couldn't walk down the street without people saying things and talking behind you. It's always like there's no smoke without fire. Post office was such a trusted organisation that people thought there must be something within that. Obviously now to have been exonerated. To have been honoured, in the OBE was a privilege. But like I said, it's not about that. There's so many people that, as Mark has just said, we've had 13 suicides, we've had 350 deaths. That's 100 more than we had in February last year. Then people will never see redress. They'll never see any accountability. It just needs to be brought to a stop, and it could if the political will was there.
And do you believe, as many do, that the Horizon software owners, people like Fujitsu, were never really truly held to account?
Of course. Look, they've been sitting there in the background, haven't they? They don't really want to come into the shadows. I was there on yesterday for the report delivered, and there was politicians there was members from the officials from government, there was post office executives there, but no sign of Fujitsu. Unless they're dragged kicking and screaming, where obviously they were forced to give evidence to the inquiry, they're just not there. I know that they've made a commitment that they have, that they will contribute towards the cost. But there's no sight of that happening, is there? They're saying, well, we'll negotiate, we'll do whatever, we'll wait till the end of the report. Why the cost at the minute is looking at about 1.8 billion. Why couldn't they come along and say, we'll at least give an interim payment of 500 million or something to show a commitment that they want to do the right thing, and they're not doing that. So I think that tells you all you need to know.
And Chris Had, we know that politicians watch this show. What would your message be to the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, if you were listening now?
No, just get it done. Get out there, get the department to, give the department promises that they would give the benefit of the doubt to postmasters. Give them the benefit of the doubt. The claims are being assessed by professionals. They're not just plucked out of thin air. Just pay people. And this could all go away within a matter of weeks and months, rather than the 2 or 3 years it's probably going to look like with the 3,500 people that are still waiting.
Yeah, well, Christopher Had, thank you for joining us today, and I wish you a swift resolution. I wish you peace, and thank you so much for your time today on GB News. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. Now, a quick bit of reaction from Nigel Nelson. Nigel, we were talking earlier about the tainted blood scandal. That's the thick end of a £12 billion bill for the government, and it's part of the problem. People like Christopher Had clearly been exonerated, clearly are due money, but the government simply doesn't have any money.
No, but although this is an awful lot cheaper, and you're talking about less than 2 billion for this compensation, and obviously it is time that they had it. Really, when you think about it, they should have had it years and years ago, but it took a TV drama before to put it in front of the public and for politicians to react properly. I like Chris's idea about an interim payment if everything else is a bit complicated.
OK, thank you very much, Nigel Nelson. Now then, if you're in search of some sun, are we doing that? Now, next, the Labour Party have put forward a biological man to be a women's officer. You couldn't make it up. That's next with me, Martin Daubney on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is he? What's he doing there?
They already know who you are, though.
Don't miss this special reunion, Eamon and Anne together again, only on GB News Breakfast this weekend from 6 a.m.
And is that a gardening tan?
No, it's a cypress tan.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
An amber heat alert remains in place across all of England until Monday morning.
Well, joining us now, GB News reporter Jack Carson. Jack Carson, where are you? Tell us. Oh, he's rowing. Jack Carson, what a go on?
Good morning. Good morning. Well, we're in the beautiful Stratford-upon-Avon, so we were on the big wheel earlier on, and one of the other beautiful things you can do is also row on the river as well. This is the Avon Boating Club. This has been going since the 1800s, 1898 it started. This boat over here on the right, that was bought brand new all the way back in the day, so it's historic here, and a lot of these boats are from the likes of the 1930s as well, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And it's this beautiful sunny weather. Here we are on the river. I've never rowed in my life before, but I think I've got the hang of it okay. But let's have a listen to a few of the people we've spoken to this morning about how they're enjoying the weather today.
Yesterday I did start to think, right, I'm getting a bit sweaty and hot now, so yeah, but it's nice, isn't it? As long as there's a breeze, it's not too bad.
Can't beat it. Literally the best thing ever. Yay!
They make the most of it because the winter was terrible this year with all the rain, so this is payback.
It makes us feel better, doesn't it? Bit of sun on our bones. It really does.
Enjoying the weather, Will? Nice? Sunny? Chatty? Well, there you go. That's what some people have been saying to us this morning about how they're enjoying the weather. I think I've got myself into a bit of a pickle. Hopefully we're not going to capsize. I think other people might be a bit more experienced in the rowing.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. 10 to 6, you're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, despite the Supreme Court's ruling that a trans woman is not an actual woman, the Labour Party has put forward a biological man to be a women's officer. You couldn't make it up. With me now is the co-founder of For Women Scotland, Susan Smith. Susan, you were one of the jubilant people outside the Supreme Court. You must have thought this was all over, and yet here we are again. It's Trans Groundhog Day of the Labour Party.
Well, we did think that they weren't going to give up that easily. And so it's proved there's been a lot of pushback from a lot of people and quite a lot of fronts. And we're still trying to fight and to ensure that everybody has the correct interpretation of the law. And we're here to support anyone who needs help in doing that.
Well, that clearly involves the Labour Party. I had Rosie Duffield on the show earlier on. She said all that time ago that she believed the Labour Party had a women problem. I asked her, do you still believe that? She said yes. So, Susan Smith, I'll put it to you. Do you think the Labour Party still has a women problem?
Yes, and I think actually a lot of political parties have this problem, and especially some of the activist groups like this one that's embedded within the political parties, and they're just trying to test the law. I know that they've tried to claim that the Supreme Court ruling has nothing to do with having a woman's officer. It's not true. If you have any position which is reserved for someone of one sex or the other, that has to comply with the Equality Act. You could, in theory, have a women's officer that was a man if you said any man and any woman could apply for the role. But I don't think that's what they're doing here. I think they're saying it's only open to women, so they have to follow the Supreme Court. And I think the sort of arrogance and ignorance in pushing on and trying to keep doing the same thing they've done for years is really indicative of how the political parties are not getting to grasps with what's going on here.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely correct. You know what, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us. Co-founder of For Women Scotland, Susan Smith. Very quick blast, Nigel Nelson back here in the studio. Let's face it, this is just Groundhog Day when the Labour Party admits an adult human female is a woman.
Oh, but that's fine, and I agree with that too. But also a biological male can be a woman.
How?
Because all they have to do is get a gender recognition certificate, or even not even go through that process, change their birth certificate, change their passport, they then change their gender.
OK, here we go. Thank you very much, Nigel Nelson, for all your company today. Well, don't go anywhere, because up next, it is an actual adult human female, the queen of primetime debate. It is Michelle Dewberry. Michelle Dewberry, what's on your menu?
Adult human female at your service. I live in hope that one of these days, Martin Daubney, I am going to sort that Nigel Nelson right out. I do try my very best to make him see sense, but I fail each and every time. A man cannot be a woman. Let's just pack it in being ridiculous. On my show tonight, I've got Rupert Lowe, I've got Bill Rammell. We've got lots to discuss. Red list when it comes to immigration. And have you seen the effigy on the top of the bonfire? A small boat in Northern Ireland will cross there, and look at that.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A very good evening to you. Temperatures rising over the next few days. Another heat wave for a large part of the country. Strong July sunshine thanks to this strong area of high pressure. There is a weather front just draped over northern Scotland that will continue to bring some cloud and patchy rain here through the night and for tomorrow. But most places under the influence of high pressure will be dry. Light winds may turn a bit misty in a few spots, particularly around western coast, and it will be quite a warm night, especially so in the southeast and East Anglia. 16-17 to start the day on Thursday. Should be a lot of sunshine across England and Wales tomorrow, more so than today, although parts of the west will start a little drab and a little misty, probably starting fairly cloudy too for Northern Ireland. Good chunk of central, southern and eastern Scotland also having a sunny day tomorrow. But on the west coast, a grey starts. Likely to be some rain and drizzle at times here too. For Northern Ireland, maybe a bit of drizzle at times along the north coast, but generally it will be a fine day. Some sunny spells coming through in Belfast and lots of sunshine for England and Wales. These western coasts likely to start with some mist and low cloud, and that may take a while to shift because the winds are so light, but certainly many inland areas having a lot of sunshine tomorrow. And it will be hot sunshine as well. Temperatures higher than today's values, likely to get over 30 degrees somewhere across the southeast and many places into the mid-20s at least. And it's starting to turn warmer still across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Friday's a similar story. The threat of thicker cloud and drizzle at times over the northern and the western Isles. Threat of some mist and low cloud around coasts, Irish Sea coast, perhaps North Sea coast too. But for most, it's hot and sunny on Friday, and temperatures ticking up even further, more widely up into the high 20s, and a few more places likely to exceed 30 degrees. May well get hotter for the weekend.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening, this is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. On the M4 westbound, roadworks cause closures between junction 24 Coldra and junction 28 Tredegar Park. In Northumberland, the A1 southbound is closed due to a collision. Expect delays on the M3 between junction 2 and 3 in Surrey due to a multi-car incident closing 2 lanes. Tomorrow, Suffolk's A14 eastbound between junction 55 Copdock and junction 56 Ipswich docks will face congestion with a 20-minute delay. And on the trains, Great Western Railway faces significant delays between Bristol, Temple Meads and Newport. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Imagine having an extra £1,000 to spend each week for an entire year. £54,321 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to spend however you like. £54,321 in cash could be landing in your bank account this year. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.